It's a very nice village, but it's a bit scattered. It's a bit scattered, awfully scattered. It's a scattered community.
I'm here. Sorry, I slipped then and interrupted the countdown with Scattered Man. But it's all right. Welcome, everybody. This is a special roundtable we have convened called the Coomer Truth Regime, and basically this has come about because I made a video called Zoomers Are Coomers yesterday, and in the space of 24 hours, my gosh, I thought this is going to stir up a few things. I did think that when I was making it, but I had no idea the true extent of the rot at the center of many online communities who, it strikes me, no longer have any conception whatsoever of traditional gender roles. And another thing I've been struck by actually is the profile of the people who've been coming at us, because we're not talking about your socialist crowd now. We've been hit by, followers of V, former friend of this channel, or friend of this channel. He's been on a good number of times. Another character called, what's his name? Gay Fatakar.
Short fat otaku. Yes, Dev.
Oh, sorry, right, okay.
Yes.
This character, he's called Dev something on Twitter. He waded into the fray, and these guys must have literally demon hordes, zombie hordes of degenerates in their following. And I've just I've had a lot of fun just kind of, swatting them off like flies, because they really haven't had many counter arguments to what I actually laid forth in the video and the heart of the problem. And so I've convened a panel here. Let's introduce the panel before I lay out some of the reactions we've seen, and then actually get into some of the why we should care about this, because a lot of the respondents like, well, why do you care about this? Why do you care? And I said that in the video, that people will be like, don't care about this. Why are you bothered about this? It is fucking important, and we're going to get into why it's important, why you should care, and why actually civilization and societies do rest on. In some ways, what we're talking about here is almost like a precondition for a functioning society. We'll get into that as things go, though. So let's go around the panel. Obviously, Mr. D is here. How you doing, D?
I'm doing reasonably well. I wasn't sure if I should pop into this august gathering, mostly because I'm an old man and this is almost my bedtime. I do sleep. I have a weird sleep pattern where I sort of sleep in two periods, much like medieval man was purported to have done. So, but I thought I'd pop on because I do think it is a very interesting and very important issue. So.
You're an old man who thinks. Who thinks in terms of nations and peoples.
Nations and people. There are no nations. There are no people. Yes.
There are only tomboys and bloody fucking femboys. And then we've got Mr. Patriarch. How you doing, sir?
Doing well. Just got the family all down for dinner, or down for bed, and just here for a cozy stream tonight.
Representing the Orthodox Church.
Yes.
And then so I'm not accused of any bias, I've also got a hardcore Catholic on the line. Settlers Lament, how you doing?
Hardcore, proud Vatican II, anti-traditional Catholic. I think this topic, this topic's really funny. We're all laughing about it, but as you sort of alluded to, AA, this is actually a really important topic. These Coomers and degenerates, they like to pretend that what they do with their genitals doesn't affect anyone. But having functional sexual mores is absolutely at the basis of any functioning society. And their attempt to undermine this is not just something on the periphery of having a healthy society. It goes right to the center.
And then we have representing the prots, Squire Turnip. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing very well. How are you, AA?
I'm good, and you're also kind of, in a strange way, representing the Zoomers, or you are the youngest person here.
You talked about the Zoomers, and I have been inundated in Zoomerism for the past ever, and I've seen the battlefield, and I'm just here tonight to tell you all how it looks. I hate to tell you, Mr. Patriarch, if we get to my short list, it's not going to be too cozy of a stream, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I read it in advance. It's situation's pretty dire.
Yeah, no, and this is, I mean, one of the biggest copes I talked about in the original video, Turnip, was remember when I said, "Oh, Twitter's real life." Actually, I think you'll find that Twitter's not as bad as real life.
The battle that you chose on Twitter is like one of the many that you've made that are. It's somehow less bad on Twitter than it is in real life, if my experience over the past 4 years across Oklahoma is anything to go by.
Yeah, and I should also introduce you to a hold on a second, to a third guest here. This is the empty chair, and this empty chair is gonna basically, I don't believe that the degenerates deserve a seat at the table. I had this, I mean, the line I came up with was basically like, Satan doesn't need a seat at the table here. Does anybody disagree? Before I continue, does anyone disagree with my stance that there shouldn't have been anyone who's like pro this on the panel? Because I just don't see any utility whatsoever in having them represented.
With the short list that I have, I don't know how you could defend what I'm about to just show you. I'm not drawing conclusions, just things that I have seen that were common. I don't know who would want to defend this, and if there is someone out there that will, I don't think we want them associated with us.
Well, I also go on.
Go on, D. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. I was just also going to say, to your point, AA, I'm not sure of the utility of having the opposition present either, because I mean, we already know what it is. Oh, it's just, are you going to sort of ban having fun now? Oh, what's the matter? You don't like fit women? Like, we get it, So.
Yeah. So let me just get on to the substance of what I was saying in the video very quickly, and some of the reactions I've seen. Now, my video was very clearly, as the author of Foundations of Writing and Foundations of Rhetoric and so on, I know how to articulate myself, and I know how to make myself clear. The video was extremely clearly about the inversion of traditional gender roles, putting women in overtly masculine roles, and men, fully grown men, occupying the role of a giggling teenage schoolgirl, essentially, which is what we saw, okay? And I showed many examples. And do you remember, in the script of that video, I said, people are stupid in 2021, so I'm going to have to really lay this on thick. I'm going to have to speak slowly. I'm going to have to point out things that are absolutely obvious to anybody with a pair of fucking eyes. Do you remember when I said that in the video?
And they still didn't get it. Yeah.
Well, even beyond that, Patriarch, we've had V come out and 100% deny that is what is going on. We have had people basically refusing to even acknowledge the fact that this is what's happening. They want to reduce the issue down to why are you against girls getting fit, bro? What's wrong with girls with abs, bro? And I mean, to some extent, I did predict this in the original video. Let me just share my screen a minute so you can see. See, I said before I even start this, here are 4 copes I'm going to see. And I've spent the past day deleting literally hundreds of comments, which are just this. They even use the word bro. I was just being facetious, but they actually do. They actually do use the word bro a lot. I was wondering if I had like NLP mind skills, where I was actually making them use the word bro because I put it right at the front of the video. And then I actually categorized. I went through as I was going through the yeah. And let me just say one other thing as well. Okay. You can still almost see my screen here, right? You see how I've got this 20 plus notifications there, right? I can clear them, and within about 2 minutes, I'll have another 20 plus and another 20 plus. So when people say, "Oh, the fact that you blocked me is a victory," and you've got like no, I see thousands and thousands of comments every day. So a block is nothing. It's just like absolutely nothing to any of us. We see so many hundreds of comments, so it really doesn't mean anything. What it means is that I'm not having it on my timeline, and I'm not going to how can I say signal boost, arguments that are frankly evil. So let me
don't platform hate, but for Coomers essentially.
Well,
yeah. Well, why would yeah, carry on. Yeah.
I want to jump in here because I think there's also an important side issue here. Is that one thing I see missing in young people is the ability to separate personal arguments from intellectual arguments. In other words, there's this idea that you cannot participate in any sort of discussion about sort of larger and larger issues, whatever they may be, without it always filtering back to who you are, how you identify, what your personal circumstances are. I deal with this all the time because, as I've complained about a few times, I always get a number of people in the UO chats and on Twitter as well saying, well, first of all, how dare you represent yourself as a Catholic because you're homosexual? It's just disgusting that you put yourself forward as an exemplar. And as I've said many times, I never put myself forward as an exemplary Catholic or as an exemplary person. I mean, the thing is, we are all degenerates. As you've said, AA, we're all product of this. And the world has always, I mean, this is how it has always been. I mean, we were made in the image of God, and we came into this world with sin, the product of original sin. And it is something that tries us and tests us. This does not mean that you cannot speak about these things. I mean, if you limited the discussion of these sorts of issues to people who were free from sin, then no one would speak. There would be no churches. There would be nothing, because no one is free from it. So, this, and I've already seen this as part of this discussion. I didn't even sort of get in on this discussion. And I saw people coming and say, well, bro, your co-host is, gay.
I mean,
how can you do that? I mean, and again, it's this tactic, it's this inability to separate, intellectual arguments from these sort of this personal nonsense that really bothers me about it. And I do think it is something that is prevalent in young people.
Right. Young people have been raised in an environment which basically just encourages Donatism, which is you can only speak about something if you are absolutely perfect on it. It's the consequence of being told from the cradle until now, however old the average Zoomer is, or the youth, the people you were talking about. It's the consequence of raising them saying that they need to listen to the new clergy, which are the experts. And the experts can't be wrong because they have the science behind them. And they extend that, since that is what they get told from a young age, they extend that to every other thing that they do as kind of their foundation. So if you do try to critique something here, they're going to point back to your own personal flaws without actually recognizing any merit that you have. Because when it boils down to it, the youth don't have anything left. So they've resorted to Donatism. Like, it's just the natural result of this. It's a void.
Yeah, no, I mean, the one other thing I want to mention on this is that, frankly, it's not the sexuality is not actually relevant to this topic.
Yes, I think that's very important.
Because this is a topic about
this wasn't an issue. This is more fundamental than the issue of sexuality. I mean, this is like getting down to real brass tacks. So Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
it's literally, this is about the differences between men and women, masculinity and femininity. So if you're gay or straight, that doesn't actually have a bearing on masculinity and femininity. I.e., you can have extremely masculine gay men, and you know, extremely feminine lesbians. Let's just say. So I would say it's not relevant to this, and I'd actually rather not bring sexuality in, because it's a whole separate topic in my mind. This is a topic about gender roles specifically.
But of course, a lot of
Yeah.
these things do end up coming downstream of these fundamental issues. I mean, I don't think it's irrelevant, but I think for the purposes of this discussion, it's probably better to stick to the kind of fundamental
Yeah, I
point.
mean, there's
Right.
there is a whole question lurking in this somewhere, as to whether a certain level of social pressure, when you start identifying as let's say if you're a man and you start identifying more and more with feminine roles, whether that in some way can have an effect on your sexuality, where you actually start being attracted to men as opposed to women. That is downstream of that, but it's kind of a side topic, if that makes any sense. So
Right, and
yeah,
we're discussing the generalities. So, as usual, in terms of the personal stuff, it's probably best to just stick to let he with no sin throw the first stone.
Yeah, and well, I also just think it's irrelevant. It's just irrelevant as well. I mean, when I saw the so I mean, I've seen literally thousands of messages in the past day directed at me personally, you know, and they came in these kind of 6 categories that I've got on the screen here. First of all, is this satire? Like, the very notion that somebody could have a problem with this is seen as like satirical in some way. Like, it's like nobody could possibly be angry about this. Why not? So this comes back to the Bowden quote I shared, about how liberalism breeds indifference. And it wants you not to care. You should care about the fact that there are thousands of young men behaving online publicly like fucking Japanese schoolgirls. You should care about that, and it has consequences for a culture. You should also
And
care.
It's all to me also that you know, because anyone, I mean, okay, so you take someone who's like, you know, kind of come down the kind of Freudian route through, you know, through kind of sort of post-structuralism, postmodernism, this sort of thing. I mean, even those people, you know, the idea that something is just a joke, that makes it kind of immune from consequences, that makes it immune from intellectual content, it's patently ridiculous, not just for someone on the right, but as I'm saying, but for sort of anyone. I mean, yes, okay, the impetus for this may have been a joke, but I think there's obviously all jokes are going to be a kind of product of the culture that made them, and they're going to have a kind of relevance within that culture. So it absolutely makes sense to talk about, even if it was just a joke, because it is symptomatic of larger issues. So I have seen that, bro, it was just a meme, it was just a joke. But I mean,
Yeah.
I do think that you obviously there's important issues in jokes. I mean, anyone who uses memes is going to realize that, you know, people often use these things as a way of talking about very serious, dire and dark issues. So that's just stupid.
One of the
response.
one of the memes I've seen as well, because I've seen quite a lot of fucking tomboy abs memes, is basically, there's a meme, I can't find it now, but there's a meme that starts off with like, oh, you know, it's just a joke, but in the end he's got like his tongue out and he's hanging, like he's behaving like a kind of, you know, the Japanese schoolgirl by the end of it. I.e., it's that thing that Poe talks about with religion, you know, you can LARP yourself into actually like going to church type thing.
Also, you mentioned the word tomboy. I think it's very important to deal with that issue as well. This has nothing to do with tomboys in the popular understanding of what that means. What you were talking about, as I understand it, isn't about tomboys. It's about a literally unrealistic, anthropomorphized, you know, sort of vision of women that isn't real. You know, a tomboy is a different thing.
let's just call out what we're talking about here. We're talking about women who are built like fucking He-Man or Arnold Schwarzenegger, yet they've got tits. But that's basically it. I mean, in most of these cases, if you remove the boobs, right, you wouldn't be able to tell if it was a man or a woman because they're that masculinized.
Right.
It's not about just a fit. It's not just about a fit woman. This is like a kind of I mean, a lot of people have posted that Louis Theroux documentary about like female bodybuilders or something like that. I mean, this is not far off kind of fetishizing a woman who's essentially a man or taking a male role. Yeah.
Right, and what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is fundamentally a form of cross-dressing. Whether or not we're talking about like literal cross-dressing, like women actually wearing male clothing, this is still essentially identical to the concept. Women taking on the roles of men, and men being aroused by that role reversal,
and their arousal. Their arousal having a female form settler as well.
Yeah.
And that's a huge. It's a huge.
Their arousal is specifically because of this role reversal. It's not accidental to it.
Yes, and that's a huge trope in culture as well. It's not just this abs thing. I mean, if you look back, I mean, even into the certainly the 80s, into the 70s, there is the kind of beginnings of this idea of kind of casting women more and more into a traditionally masculine role and having that being presented as an almost sexualized ideal. The kind of woman soldier, the woman commando. I mean, even something like Terminator, like Sarah Connor, prime example.
And something else that you need to discuss about this is why is it happening? And you can see it's been going on for a while. It's not just the Zoomers where you're seeing symptoms of this, but why is it happening? Well, you can see it best in the Zoomers because they were raised in a void. You people talk about your generational cycles. The collapse happened before the Zoomers. The Zoomers are currently being raised in a void, and I think we'll discuss that more as the stream goes on. But in the absence of any sort of traditional upbringing, in the absence of any sort of church influence on your life, or any sort of parental, traditional guidance that you would get in other generations, you get weak men, and weak men are obviously weak. They want to be taken care of in a very feminine way. It's what happens. It's the natural conclusion of all of this. That's why you're seeing all of this.
Yeah. Let me work down this list. But yes, essentially, as I said in the video, it's an abnegation of male responsibility and seeking for the woman to take over male roles. I mean, honestly, I read that bit from Evola in the actual video. That section on the traditional concept of man and woman has been something I've been thinking about all day, because he actually says, I mean, we could argue about whether this is too constrictive or not, but he basically says that men can only find self-actualization in two ways. That is, the man to become the complete man of action, whether that's a warrior or you can kind of more it doesn't have to be war. You can have other types of men of action, right? But you have to dedicate yourself to that and kind of almost become nothing but that. So you kind of transcend. It's always about transcending the self, right? Or you can become like the total ascetic, which in one form is the monk, of course. In the Platonic sense, they've managed to transcend the sensual world. Okay, so you kind of I don't know, like you kind of rise above matters of the flesh in that way. But if you read more Evola, you can also reach that path in other ways, like through, we could think about a craftsman who becomes like a total master of something. There's a kind of transcendent spirit.
Character.
Say that again, sorry.
It's like a Isaac Newton character, just total devotion to a specific thing.
So you have the path of absolute action or the path of absolute devotion, and these are the two paths to self-actualization as a man. Okay, according to Evola in tradition. Okay, now there's also these two paths for women. Okay, but for women, because they're not men, it has to come out in a different way. So their path of absolute action is actually the role of a lover. By that, he doesn't mean like having sex. He means devotion to a man and giving of herself, so that she kind of like sublimates herself into being like an extension of what he wants. Okay, lots of people will be like, "Oh, that's patriarchal," but yes, this is the absolute capital P tradition patriarchy. Okay, or the absolute devotion for the woman comes in the role of a mother. You know, we were talking about the Virgin Mary before we came on air very briefly. This figure of the mother is very prominent and prescient in many different religions of the world, and it's because one of the two possible paths for women traditionally was then devotion to her kids. Devotion, I mean, he puts it as devotion to the son, but let's be more gay and egalitarian. Devotion to the kids, basically, and the woman then loses herself, like, or starts to think of their needs ahead of her own. And I've seen this, having been a father in Mrs. AA. Like she puts our daughter's needs ahead of hers, ahead of ours. She's always thinking of that first. And Patriarch, you also have kids, right? You've seen this in Mrs. Patriarch to an extent.
No, absolutely. No, I think this is getting to something which is very deep and very true. And you're talking about Evola, but I think, from a Christian perspective, this is totally in line with that as well. And, some people will say, Evola, he was kind of a sort of a neo-pagan perennialist. Like, we don't buy into that. But, people from all different, areas of the world, all different walks of life can run into truth, and they can communicate that truth. And what Evola is getting at here is a very key Christian doctrine of dying to self, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the man is fulfilled by dying to self through aestheticism, in terms of the priesthood or becoming a monk. For women, that's an option as well if they want to become a nun or whatever. So the purely spiritual route of aestheticism, of dying to self and living your life exclusively for God. You are basically taking your place willingly in the great chain of being underneath the divine. Now, for the laity, we also are called to certain degrees of dying to self also. So as a patriarch, as a father, it is your responsibility to sort of give of your time, give of your resources, give of your own sort of personal interests and aspirations for the good of providing for your family, protecting your family, and sort of steering the ship of the household. Meanwhile, for the woman, dying to self is sort of, being your husband's helpmeet, which is an out of fashion term to use, but it's nevertheless true. So being your husband's helpmeet, raising the children, and basically helping build a family. And these are all things which are essentially rejected in, all modern society. It's not about rights. It's all about rights and sort of what I can get. It's the modern mindset on this is purely extractive. What can I get out of this? And really what we should be thinking is, what are my responsibilities? In what ways can I die to self in such a manner that will create not only a better life for me and my family, but by extension also the world, and in a certain sense kind of bringing the kingdom to earth in a certain way.
Yeah. So I mean, just to mention very quickly, Evola's method is to look across all the traditions of the world, including Christianity. I mean, I don't know, he often draws from Christian sources, but he looks across them all. So he says, his typical method is to say, well, in India or in the Hindu tradition, it's like this, and in Christianity, it's like this, in various pagan traditions, it was like this, and but basically draws out what is essential and what is common to all of them, which is in terms of men and women, essentially what we've just been talking about. But note that the key difference between what we're talking about, the traditional way of looking at it, and the liberal way of looking at it, is that the liberal sees only the individual, right? And the individual in liberalism is driven by self-interest, whereas we're talking about an individual self-actualizing by going beyond themselves. And in all of these four paths that we've talked about here, for the man or for the woman, you're coming up to a position where you're going beyond just your own kind of trivial desires in a way. But anyway, let me go through these categories before we get to Turnip's list here, or we'll be here all night. So the second one was a lot of people accuse me of soy rage, right? But I basically am a soy boy. I'm an incel, right? Women find me repulsive. Or else have I been?
An incel with a wife and child, yes. Okay.
Yeah, I know. An incel with a wife and child. I mean, God, when I think back on the years, I wish I was. I wish I had been an incel for longer.
I mean, I also say that there's a component of this, of people who are coming into this not knowing you, and not, shall we say, being familiar with your particular style.
Yes.
I mean, there is an element of the way you deal with things that I think does take a bit to kind of appreciate, a bit of work to appreciate.
So, but anyway, the charge ultimately at the end of all of that is basically this is me raging because I fear strong women. Okay, and this comes back to what we were talking about just now, patriarch. And in fact, my buddy Bad Girl Bex, who's been around this channel for many years, she piped up on Twitter and she said, he doesn't fear strong women. He's put me in my place many times, she said. But she then said something much more profound after that little joke, which was that people now conceive of a strong woman. It's almost like this kind of, like Beyonce image, all the ladies, independent, and all this sort of, and essentially what you get at the end of all of that is an ersatz man, just basically like a surrogate man, like a Rey from Star Wars, right? It's just a woman who can just do all the same things that men can, right?
We've completely inverted what a strong woman actually is. I mean, what a strong woman
what Beck said
traditionally would be.
What Beck said was a strong woman is a woman who can stand by her man and who can look after her kids, and a weak woman is someone who is too insecure to be able to do that, and so tries to do the opposite. And I just thought that was a very interesting framing of things from Beck. So I wonder if we can discuss strong women a little bit.
Yeah,
Right.
no, I think that's absolutely true. Just sort of in my own, personal life, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but before I met my wife, I dated a number of girls or whatever. But what put, I guess, Mrs. Patriarch as a cut above the rest is kind of what you're talking about there. It's this moral fiber and this stick with itness that was lacking in the others, essentially. So things weren't going right, and they're like, oh, it's, I'll just bounce or whatever, whatnot. But my wife, she got bone cancer like right after we got married, and she handled it with like a degree of grace and just steel that you didn't see that would. I haven't seen sort of any sort of young people handle as well as she did. And, she becomes a mother. She doesn't complain about sort of doing the housework or cleaning. It's a quiet strength that comes from character and internalized morality. And because of that, she's able to sort of orient her life in a way that makes sense. And even if, she has, sort of her bad days like we all do, I can rely on her in a way that I simply can't with any other women that, I've met, so, and I think that's sort of what Bex is getting at is this, it's a female strength is of a different kind than what you would imagine as masculine strength. It's not sort of being assertive and domineering and having the abs, the Conan abs or whatever, is being able to sort of hold everything down and be sort of a man's, kind of the North Star, concerned with the day to day and faithful above all else. A woman, a strong woman is basically your first mate, and you rely on them for a lot, and their loyalty is their strength.
Right, and something else that you have to, that you also have to see, if we are talking about the Zoomers, which if I remember correctly was the original topic, they aren't necessarily, the majority of them aren't at marrying age yet, even by traditional standards, depending on how far back you go. So you also have to look at what is a woman supposed to be before marriage. We can talk like very basic physical things. How is she supposed to dress? What is she supposed to do with her hair? What is her role supposed to be in society up until that point? Well, in Christianity, we know how women are supposed to act, grow out their hair long, dress modestly, make themselves ready for marriage to a good man. With the Zoomers, though, you get literally the exact opposite of that. They're told to cut their hair. They're told to dress as immodestly as possible. They're told to be, as we've been discussing, as independent as possible, which basically just means do what the men are doing, but less well, because you're not built for that. It's a complete inversion, like all the way down across the age range, and there are very few outliers.
Yeah, I think that there is something also at the heart of this, which I think I've mentioned before in discussions on other subjects, which is that the world is so saturated in fiction. This is one of the reasons that I've always been slightly distrustful of fiction. But if you look at the way our society operates, so much of everything that people encounter, everything that they do, is one level of fiction on top of another level of fiction on top of another level of fiction. Everything is mediated. Sort of every hero that people have is a kind of fictive character, a cartoon character, a character from a film, a character from a comic book. The interactions that people have on a daily basis, the images that they see, almost everything that people do, young people, older people, everyone in this society is completely mediated and fictional. And so you get these strange situations where people are talking about strong women who mostly don't exist. I mean, we know that this whole stereotype that is presented as the bad, as the bad bitch, the kind of, or the kind of Sarah Connor type, it's fiction. It all comes from fiction. And so I think we've reached a point where we're so saturated in media that a lot of young people have no idea the difference between these various this pyramid of fictions and what life is actually like. A lot of the people responding to this issue are people that are barely out of their teenage years. They don't know what a real woman is. They don't know what a fit woman is. They don't know what a man is. They don't know what anything is. These are people who have no experience in life, no experience of other people, besides response to fiction after fiction after fiction after fiction. So I do think it's a huge problem, and it is literally driving our civilization mad. All you have to do is look around, and even the people who are like, I'm a skeptic, I don't like SJWs, but come on, bro, it's just a a hot chick, what do you have against it? Even these people would have to, I don't think can deny the fact that there is something fundamentally broken. And I think a big aspect of this is that we are living in unreality to the point where we've forgotten what being human being actually is about.
Well, Mr. D, the issue with the result of the skeptic movement, the anti-SJWs and all of that, is they reacted so extreme to their perceived enemy that they ended up being against all morality instead of the one that was being forced upon them and inverted. So I think it is perfectly reasonable to assume that some of them just don't know what's going on. I think at this point they may have rejected things so much to such an extremity that they are just against all morality in general instead of, the bad one.
I just want to come back on something that you said just now, Turner, because I grew up in the 90s in Wales, as some people
Right.
know, and there was a very, very big push during that era. We talked about it before of the ladette, and the ladette was essentially a woman who behaved just like a man. She drank pints, she wolf whistled the boys, she pinched their ass,
Right.
she'd behave like a lad. So there was so on one side you had the heavy lad culture, so that was actually quite masculine looking back on it. All my mates were lads and things like that. But there was also a heavy push to get basically the girls to hang out with the boys as well. She'd watch football. She'd have a very active. And one of the things I remember is you were talking about how premarital women were expected to behave, traditionally. You're talking about the idea of a virgin, essentially,
Yes.
until marriage. Well, when I was in school, and because we were in Wales, we start young. I joke. I mean, I was probably about 15 or something, and that was common. I would suggest.
Right.
And
Well, we'll get to the short list.
yeah.
That's not exactly gone.
I remember that the social pressure on young women was kind of the other way around. So if you were still a virgin by the time you were 16 or 17, that would be a mark of social shame.
Yeah, and that's still...
You're square, you're frigid, you're...
Yeah, that's not cool.
It's still kind of around today, yes, and we'll get to that. It's just that it's extended range in what peers it's targeting, so now it's not just the 15-year-olds, but we'll get there.
And there was a very strong push in the culture, and many of these things came from America and New York and LA. Let's just say, I remember one of the things was a Sex in the City. If you watch Sex in the City, I haven't watched it in recent years, but it's all basically women who go on serial dates. They're sleeping around. They do nothing but talk about men, but they treat. It's like I quoted Blur in the video. They were treating men like kind of notches on their bedpost in a way, which is a behavior that, in my experience, no women at all, even the ones who think they can handle.
No.
Even the ones, and they would get a reputation. Back in my day, you'd say, yeah, she's a bit of a slag. I don't know if people are allowed to say that anymore because it's called slut shaming or whatever. But
no, you don't even have that. It's just a non-entity in the minds of most Zoomers that that's a bad thing. It's just neutral. It exists. There's no bad connotation. The matter is,
whether they're Zoomers, Boomers, Gen X, it doesn't matter what generation they are. Women cannot handle that. All this
Correct.
stuff about fuck buddy and friends with benefits and so on.
Yep.
I mean, it's all bollocks because women can't deal with it, and they're not built to deal with it.
And the other
But
thing,
again, I mean, this is back to the idea that I posited that again, people live in fictions. I mean, no one, even the people in Sex in the City, people who write that, they don't live. This isn't the life that these people have lived. I mean, this is all a kind of fictional world. But I mean, you have people who gear their lives towards trying to achieve and live these fictions. Of course, all they find in these is misery. But I think it's not just true for women. I think that what we have been presented as this idea of masculinity in media culture is also a bit of a fiction that also leads men to misery. This idea again that, well, it's a man should try to get as many slags as possible, drink beer all the time, watch football, shirk his responsibilities. I mean, that to me is not a particularly accurate picture of the peak of masculinity either.
I would say though, D, that I mean, we got a lot of that messaging when I was a teenager, but then in the 2000s, if you remember, there were an awful lot of those again American from Hollywood and New York, but there was a lot of these frat boy comedies, like Judd Apatow and Adam Sandler, and remember all that whole, what they call it, the frat Pack, or what were they? The Brat Pack. I can't remember what they were called, but
Frat Pack.
But if you think about the messaging in those films, one, there was always an extraordinary gap between, let's just say, the attractiveness of the woman and the state of the man in those films. I mean, it would literally be like, what's his name, like Steve Carell and fucking like Jennifer Aniston or something. Like, a couple that is not kind of believable in terms of the way they'd matched them up. But a lot of the messaging of those films was that a lot of the male characters were kind of these overgrown juveniles. They were like adolescents who never grew up. They never became men. They were just kind of trapped in. And then as time went on, so that was like the mid to the early 2000s was all of those sorts of things, and they'd just be schlubby. They'd be schlubby men, and somehow they got away with it as well, which is the most bizarre. Like there was no like coming of age story in that. They'd kind of end the films, in the same kind of pathetic
fraternity or something.
But then in the later part of the 2000s and into the early 2010s, I remember there was a shift into the kind of the quirky rom-com hero, where they were all a bit nerdy and a bit autistic, and what's that guy's name who was in the Social Network? He played
Jesse Eisenberg.
Yeah, it was like Jesse Eisenberg and fucking Scott Pilgrim and all this sort of shit. Where they were much more weaselly, nerdy characters, still emotionally stunted, still basically adolescents well into their adulthood. Okay, they never actually grew up. But now, you then got the, how can I say, the women became ever more kind of like dominant and kick-ass in those movies, as opposed to what the male characters were doing. So there was an awful lot of messaging to young men, as if to say, you never really have to take responsibility for anything.
Yeah.
So this behavior that I'm pointing out now, with this little thing with the tomboy abs, of wanting the woman to take care of you as a man, as a father, which is very weird if you think about it, I think comes from not just the last few years, it comes from decades of kind of quiet programming on, what is expected of men these days. And then of course you've got the thing that
sorry, if I could just interrupt here. How I think I'd summarize it is the whole tomboy fetish is basically stealing masculinity away from men and then selling it back to them as a fetish.
Yes, absolutely right.
I actually, this is something I watched a couple months ago, but there's a channel called like Meme Review or something like that. I can't remember, or Philosophy of Memes. I don't know. He did a review on the philosophy of the tomboy GF meme, and his channel is all kind of like semi-satirical, but I thought it was actually a pretty insightful video on the topic, where he was basically talking about how it's something to appeal to young men who had stunted lives growing up. They weren't as masculine as they wished they could be. So they fetishize that masculinity and put it on women.
Yeah, very accurate. Now, Turnip, I know you have this list. Let me very quickly get to the end of this, and then I think we should launch into your list. Okay, so anyway, that was the second point. The soy rage. The third point is just a woman with abs, bro. And this was actually what became the dominant message today among like. I keep on forgetting the guy's name. What was it? Fat gay. What's his name? Sorry. Short fat
otaku.
Right.
Short fat otaku. Yes.
Sorry, I keep remember this guy's name.
Gay something. Yes.
But and this basically Morgoth made this on his Telegram. This basically summed up so much of the discourse today, which was. He said academic Asian community is in full war footing because Zoomers and centrist YouTubers can't understand the difference between these images. Let's just have a look at the images a second, okay? And again, we're in 2021, so let's point out the really fucking obvious here, folks, okay? Here we've got a muscular man holding an axe with a feminine woman with a nice rear end, kind of sitting in a slightly submissive posture to him.
Yes.
Here we have a woman with massive bulging 8-pack, is it? Bulging muscles. And then we have this little, what is this character meant to be?
Yeah, I was trying to
Kermit
figure
the
out.
Frog,
What is
motherfuckers.
that? Is it?
Is it a little
It looks like
snack,
a
or
sock
is it?
puppet.
Is
Yeah, I
it
thought
like
it was like a sock puppet or something.
Is it meant to be like the White Knight, the horse of the White Knight? I don't really know what this
Snack.
character.
I don't know.
Is.
Yeah, I'm.
But
Sadly,
whatever
not,
it is,
not up
it's a,
on my memes. Yeah.
it's a pathetic little
Pathetic-
weasel of a character,
A
isn't it?
pathetic male creature.
Yes. So if you just look at the kind of, I don't know if anybody studied film and you did your mise en scène, right? Look at the mise en scène. Who is holding center stage? Who is holding the dominant role in the gaze on the left? It's the man, and she is in a supporting role. And she's, it's not that she's weak. It's not that necessarily she's a weak woman. She's just in a conventionally feminine role, and he is in a conventionally masculine role. And this is obviously completely inverted here. Only, I would argue that little snack man here is a lot more pathetic than she is here. He is like actively pathetic and pitiable as a creature.
Right, no redeemable qualities at all.
Yeah.
And the whole point of why I'm concerned about this is because I'm concerned about young men identifying with this fucking puppet here. Okay. Now for the likes of V, and I'm just going to call him Dev because I can't remember his name. He also goes by Dev.
That is his name. Yes, call him Dev.
For the likes of V and Dev to say, I don't know what you're talking about. There's no gender inversion going on here. It's just a girl with just a fit girl with abs. What's wrong with you? I mean, this reminds me of arguing about immigration and demographics with a fucking leftist. This is like when I remember about 18 months ago, I codified the levels of cope, and it's all about like trying to deny the issue and minimize the issue and pretend it doesn't exist. I mean, how can anybody look at these two images and not see the difference? Am I going mad here? You guys tell me.
You're spot on.
And of course, we also have to. I mean, I think it also needs to be said that women don't look like that figure on the right. I mean, okay, you like women to be fit, fine. What does a fit woman look like? I mean, a fit woman does not have 8-pack abs. I mean, yes, women can get them, but it is not the natural state of a female's body, especially, of course, a female who is born children. It is not their natural state to look like that, and it takes a great deal of work for a man to look like that, let alone a woman. It is not natural for a woman's body to be that lean, to carry that sort of muscle. It requires a huge amount of, I would say, damaging physical routines and deprivations and starvations to be able to look like that. That isn't an image of a fit woman. That's an image of a fantasy creature. And I think, again, well, it's just a meme, bro. It's just a joke. Fine. But there is a serious issue here, which is that when you start to chop away at these fundamental aspects of how a civilization propagates itself and sustains itself, over time, all of these, it's just a meme, it's just I just like it, it's just what I do in my bedroom, they add up and they add up and they add up until society is not capable of replicating itself, it's not capable of defending itself. You end up with a world full of these little worm men. What are you going to do when the next superpower comes knocking?
And look,
are they going to stand up?
Look at the woman portrayed on the right. We were talking about like what the beautiful woman is in terms of Christianity earlier, and modesty was the key factor there. The thing that makes a woman beautiful is the fact that she is modest. The woman on the right in the picture is in no way that.
No, I was going to say, I hope you're not making her the modest character.
No,
because I would call that modesty.
the woman on the right is in no way modest. And that just completely destroys the beauty of woman. There's no getting around that.
Yeah, and also it's not just this meme. This sort of sexual inversion of domineering women and these Weasley men. It's it's pretty common too in other types of media, like you know, classic popular example would be like what's that show? Big Bang Theory, with like the Weasley just push around wimp male scientist character, and he's got this like power, you know, empowered woman girlfriend who just like bosses him around and dominates him all the time. That's just sort of one example that comes to mind, and it's affecting the psyche, and you know, and kind of a more dark underbelly to this sort of meme that we see here. You also see it in pornography as well. This idea of the sort of big, often ethnically diverse sort of Amazon women and these Weasley little guys who are kind of, you know, basically sexually assaulted by these gargantuan women. This is a thing, and it's. I mean,
I pointed this out last year as well. Nobody wants to touch it. Maybe they're embarrassed, but a huge amount of pornography messaging is about women being taken by black men, and the white men being told that they're not good enough to do it, so they might as well
save it for the list. Save it for the list.
So they might as well become women. Okay. Anyway,
yeah.
let's.
And also, there's also this whole dominatrix thing, which has been, I would say, part of popular culture for a long time. I was. Do you remember Ilsa She-Wolf of the SS? Have you seen that film? I mean, there's a film called Ilsa She-Wolf of the SS. I think I've got to get the title.
No, I haven't.
It's from the 70s, but I mean there was a whole spate of these sorts of things that kind of introduced this idea of the dominatrix woman into kind of popular culture. I was reminded of this yesterday because I saw an image of Madonna.
Sorry, my stream taken down. Is it? Look,
yeah, but I would be careful with.
Yeah, there she is.
Ilsa She-Wolf of the SS. Yes. No, I was reminded of this because I saw a picture of Madonna. Apparently, there was some sort of award show, and Madonna made an appearance. Madonna is like 75 now. I mean, she's very old, and she came out wearing. Do you remember Madonna in the kind of the early mid 90s when she was sort of butch, and she started wearing this slight kind of Nazi kind of vinyl, outfits and carrying a whip around.
M. Bison
Chic. Well, she was dressed like that last night, or I think it was last night at this award show. I mean, this 75-year-old grandmother of the SS. But I was just reminded of the fact that, of course, that trope also has been around in popular culture for quite a long time. This idea of the dominate, of literally the sexual fetish of domination.
And of course, Madonna had a lot of, all through her career, had a lot of paid male dancers, didn't she? Who would behave in various different submissive ways to her. I mean, I won't go into some of the things I've heard about what Madonna used to get up to, but she was part of this. But of course, Madonna is a subversive, as we know. Let's just finish up this list because I want to get into some of the stuff Turnip has got in this, because we'll ramp it up about several notches once we get to Turnip's lip. So imagine getting angry about this. I think we've covered these last two. Also, really interested me. I'll cover them both. So I got quite a bit of. You sound like you sound literally like an 1980s Christian homophobic preacher. And then,
cool.
Right then,
nice.
The classic. You're in the closet. You care about this because you're it. Basically, you're basically a kind of, you are the little snack man there licking the abs. You want to do this. It's projection. And I've always been very dubious about this tactic, and I find it very interesting that when push comes to shove, you basically end up back in like classic 1980s, the Southern Baptist preacher is secretly gay thing. Can anybody tell me about where this trope comes from, that anybody who cares about this is secretly in the closet? Tell me about it.
In regards to the clergy part with the Protestants, there was a big scare to do with this, and it was later uncovered that maybe two of the leading spokesmen for this backlash did engage in sodomy at like one point in their life. So then it became like it became a meme that spread throughout the population that if you just, well then, as we can see here, if you dislike homosexuality, you yourself are gay. So they've taken the past lives of two people who had since reformed, and they're using that to condemn literally everyone that went against, making it mainstream.
Well, I will say there's also a very ancient cultural trope with the idea of the sort of corrupt clergyman. Going back to kind of even like Chaucer, you get there, or Rabelais, you get this character of the kind of overly pious person who is in their own kind of spiritual or personal life, a bit of a mountebank and a bit of a kind of hypocrite. And those characters do exist. I mean, the thing is, I don't think there's anything wrong with being always skeptical of the motivations of men, because of course men are sinful, and there will be people who get into these sorts of things out of a genuine need to promulgate morals, and there will be people who get into these sorts of things as a grift or as a way of sublimating their own guilt. I mean, yes, obviously there's going to be examples of bad men amongst Christians. There's examples of bad men amongst every group, because again, men are fallen and they will give into these temptations, and this is a problem. So we end up in this position where no one can make moral pronouncements, no one can try to discuss the issues of morality, because of course you can't talk about that because you're compromised.
What I'll say is, over the past day, I have seen these Alinsky tactics tried again and again by Dev and by his various minions. Well, what I want to say is this, though. I've had numerous run-ins this year also with the trans activists, okay? Because another hill I think it's worth people fighting on, and dying on, if you have kids and you care about them, is the trans kids issue, right? It's a separate issue, but I think that, when you've got kids as young as 5, 6, and 7 having their gender confused, right, by trans activists, that has to be stopped, because you could lead to scenarios where they commit suicide, where they end up making decisions that they can't reverse. It's just satanic. It's wrong. And one of the kind of attack strategies a lot of us have found is basically just call these people groomers and pedophiles, because that's what they are at the end of the day. Now, hold on a second, Turner. Right. The comebacks we had on a lot of those things, I have seen repeated in this discussion. So in that discussion, they'd say, "Oh, what do you care about this for? It's just clothes. It's just clothes." Do you see the disingenuous reframing of the issue? If the issue was just about fucking clothes, you wouldn't be there arguing, and you wouldn't be an activist for it, would you? It's not just about the ability of a 6-year-old to choose their clothes. So I find that completely disingenuous minimizing of the issue and reframing of the issue to be like a persistent liberal problem. And then once you get past that, if you're concerned about this, it must actually be because you're a pedophile. What I'm saying is the danger with this tactic that they're doing, that if you care about this, it must be because you're in the closet and you're gay, is that, well, I can already see them using it for the next one, which is that if you care about children in any sort of way, it's because you're the one who wants to fiddle them, and not the other way around. How do you what is the correct response to these sorts of
Can I
okay.
Can I respond to what Dee said? I was trying to get that in before the subject moved too far along. The way that us Christians would go about saying what should and should not happen is that we are not prescribing our own ideas onto other people. We have a perfect man that came down and led a perfect life, who prescribed how to live to us. Like that, they attack us because we have shortcomings in our own lives, and it's true that we do. And we preach that, this is how you're supposed to act, and it's an impossible standard, but it is still a standard that does exist. But we aren't the ones that came up with it. It was directly from the Son of God. Like
Yeah.
that's the answer to that.
That's actually related to kind of what I was going to say. So what we're dealing with here is basically classic subversion. And I actually, I think yesterday I was listening to a YouTube stream by this guy. His name is Brother Augustine, and it was a really good video. I think the video was titled "Should Christians Be MGTOW?" But there was this little snippet, and I ended up clipping it and making it into a video. And I'd encourage everyone to watch it. It's called "How to Deal with Subversion." And it was basically on this exact point. Someone in the comments was basically bitching about how, you're a bigot and so on and so forth. And the way I think best to do with it is you deny their moral presuppositions. You make them defend their moral presuppositions. So you state that, hey, this isn't my idea, like sort of what Turnip's saying. These are the values which have been held not by me, but by sort of all basically sane civilizations, including our own until very recently. Christendom, I am not going to adopt your language. I don't look to you to sort of derive morality from what you say. And what's the basis for your morality, essentially? So you basically cannot engage on their footing. You deny their moral framework.
So what I found, Patriarch, is that it's like trying to nail down fucking jelly with a knife, right? So when I was trying to debate with this fat dev character, right, he kept on, like, he would talk about anything apart from the fucking issue itself. And I kept on saying, why are you defending women? Why are you defending young men acting like teenage schoolgirls? And I'd ask him again, and I'd ask him again, and I did the same to V. And all these fuckers would do would be like, you married, bro? I heard you that you once did this, and I once did, like, anything but address the issue itself. And it reminds me of a passage from Thomas Sowell's Vision of the Anointed: arguments without arguments. And this is what they do, and this is a leftist tactic. It's been a leftist tactic throughout the
scrabbling to the personal attack right away, trying to throw obfuscation in your eyes so that you get sort of blinded. You start defending yourself against these personal attacks, and then, of course, the issue drops. I mean, it is a disingenuous tactic but the problem is that I think that you see all this with this issue because they don't have a way to really defend these things. I mean,
right.
The thing is here, you say, well, we're dealing with, you don't accept their moral framing. These aren't people with a moral frame. I don't know under what moral frame you could sort of like defend, this sort of behavior. So you're right. I mean, it's an absolutely disingenuous thing.
And then I saw all the other ones too. I saw the classic, the one that Morgoth coined, the hatchling. Tradition? Who's tradition? Fucking tradition, you knob. It's not difficult to know what traditional gender roles are.
And the thing is, these guys are smart. I mean, the thing is, Dev is smart. V, I don't know much about, but I'll assume he's been around long enough that he is capable of kind of passing through an argument. I mean, these guys, they are capable of having a discussion about this without kicking sand into the face of the person asking the questions. But they're choosing not to because it's difficult. It's very difficult because, of course, again, you run into the same problem. You have these people who, they understand that there was something wrong with SJW culture. They understand that there's something wrong in the West. They understand that there's something wrong in our civilizations. But they cannot make the final leap to one of the fundamental things that's missing, which is a binding faith, because they don't have it personally. I mean, this is a strange issue, of course, AA, because I saw someone accuse you of having a Renaissance PFP, which, of course, your PFP on Twitter is not Renaissance; it's an icon, and also saying that you're like a Christian or religious. That you're like a Bible thumper. But again, I mean, you are very different.
Will be soon.
Hopefully, yes. I mean, and that's what I mean is that you of all these people are able to understand, even though at this point you aren't able to make that personal leap yourself, but you can see that the problem is that the binding religious faith of our civilization has drained away from the popular imagination. You know.
Yes, and I mean, I find, you know, the Leninists always say, you know, when you find mush, plunge the bayonet. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not leaving this go. I'm going to keep on fucking plunging, and this is why this is one of the reasons I wanted to do this stream, to strike while the iron was hot, as it were, because their thing, one of the other copes, right, is that this is just one picture. This is just one little. Why are you picking on this one little insignificant thing? Whereas, as I said in the video, I think this is a tip of an iceberg, and I'm just showing you like one fairly anodyne part. And I'm trying to segue over into finally letting Ryan share his list here. Ryan?
Sorry. Okay, so how are we going to display this on stream?
I could just get it up if you want.
Yeah, I've sent it in the private chat a couple of times now, but
I downloaded it. Hold on.
I might warn you, if anyone is afraid of any potentially vulgar subjects or excessive black pills, might be the time to avert.
So here we go. These are things that you've seen in school past few years.
Typical Zoomer inserting a trigger warning.
Well,
yeah, trigger warning.
It's not like
we don't.
This
need
is another
warnings. We need sin warnings.
This is another level. Is kind of what I'm trying to get across. So, in my time in the public education system, I just got out of it. I spent a good 4 years in there. These are the things that I saw, which were either particularly terrible or were particularly common. I saw people arguing on Twitter saying it's just Twitter, it's not real life. And I mean, yeah, you're right. It is just Twitter. It's not real life, because real life is somehow far worse than it was manifesting itself on Twitter. So what have I seen here? Well, we've kind of got like a UO list. So if you all kind of want to, should we like read out the whole list and then go through it?
Let's start with, let's just start and move down. So
Okay.
the left column first, then the right column.
So there were, when I was very, like, just got into freshman year, 14 or so, this would have been 2017, if I remember correctly. I have one instance that I remember very starkly in my mind of peers pressuring a sixth grader because of his stature and because of the way that he acted. He was trans or feminine, too feminine to be a man, something like that. And so they pressured him into this kind of a pedophilic cult that you've kind of pointed out on Twitter. And just, I know the person. I don't want to like go into too much details because there's a lot more here. The guy was a very, very astute mathematician. He was, doing basically trigonometry starting in the 6th grade, and, has since declined because he's been pushed down this path. Something else. I need to be, okay. So something else that I witnessed and heard about, and, because I can't be on all of the buses at once during all of these things because I was in the band program, but something that there were multiple witnesses to that I then had to like check on. There was fornication on the buses, various forms of fellatio and other vulgar activities that were very common. When I got into the music program as a freshman, I didn't believe it, but there were stories of people that were fornicating in the practice rooms. This is like, you walk in, there's a big room, which is where the full band rehearses, and there are rooms with windows right in public. Those are the practice rooms. Apparently they were happening in there, and then I, was witness to it one time. There's also sodomy going on in there. So another point, just to get away from the sexual degeneracy, was all of my peers are literate, but I can count on both of my hands the amount of people that actually read, like just in their spare time. So I'm not saying that they're illiterate, they just don't read. There's no drive to read, there's no care for reading. Everything has been torn down before they got here by the previous generations. No one cares anymore. This is kind of where we're at. No one reads. Back onto the relationship stuff, there was open polyamory. So, people being very open about the fact that they were with multiple people at the same time. And this was a common thing. It's not just like one example. It happened quite often.
So how does that work? Like people like, I've got 2 girlfriends, or
Yeah.
we're actually in a love triangle.
Yeah.
Like, how does this work?
Exactly as you just described it, and then vice versa, a woman with 2 men.
Now, when I was growing up, that was only ever like featured on like Louis
On
Theroux
television,
or like freak show stuff, or like occasionally it'd be like a Jerry Springer, but it was always almost kind of freak show to be mocked. Isn't it funny how quickly things that are presented on the media then become normalized? Because this sort of thing would have been unheard of when I was
right. Continuing on the list, there is open infidelity. I was just
going to say, and keep in mind for the audience, this is in if I understand correctly, rural schools in red state, uber red state, Oklahoma. So you can just imagine like what urban LA
I've heard
are like.
And even like, you don't even have to go to the extreme. I've heard people that come from like Oklahoma City or Tulsa, and the way that they describe their high schools is like that one ship from Event Horizon that they go on and it's like possessed. They describe like a scene out of that. So yeah, it's even worse in the cities. In the full red state, by the way. These places don't appear blue on the map.
There's a guy in the chat saying this list seems like a massive exaggeration. Would you like to respond to that?
Well, actually, I do have a friend that went to the same school with me. I can bring him on right now because he's just in the other room. We were talking about this last night, and I asked him if I was over-exaggerating something. And I believe in one of these, he said I was underselling the issue.
Turnip went to Caligula's Barge High School.
So, I mean, I can go get him at any point.
I believe you.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, I went to an all-boys boarding school in the 1980s. And, I mean, that was like, just like being in a convent compared to this.
Continuing on, open infidelity and cuckoldry. So that's just being very open with the fact that you, like... So this is different from the polyamory and the fact that it wasn't supposed to happen. Obviously, it wasn't intended, but they're very open about it, and it's very common. It happens multiple times, and women will jump from man to man, without. Yeah. So.
Turnip, hold on. When you say cuckoldry,
yes,
is that cuckoldry in the same way that you see in some of the pornographic materials, where, you have a man like watching his girlfriend with another guy and he's kind of into it, or is it just kind of basic?
That has happened before, and I was unfortunately privy to that explanation.
This is happening in school. Come on.
This was not in the school. This was away from the school, but it was still people that at the time I think they would have been 16.
Yeah.
So like he was just a grade ahead of me, and I don't even know who was older or younger, so it could have very well just been a year older than me. But so like this was happening. Some of it is what you described. Others is just like the classic definition of, the women are cheating. So there's a mass proliferation of casual sex. And I want to remind people, this is not just the high school that this applies to with the mass proliferation of casual sex. There are stories coming out of the middle schools where this is a thing. And the middle schools in America, if you don't know, are ages, what would you say, about 12 to 14 or 15?
Yeah, and I this is just sort of anecdotal, but sort of related to what you're talking about. I think a lot of this has to do with, unfortunately, the proliferation of internet and mobile devices. Because I was talking to a teacher here in South Africa, and they were talking about similar kinds of things, even in middle school, about like kids, like, I hate to say it, but like blowing each other in like middle school and whatnot, being like a problem in, South African public schools.
Right.
And this sort of thing would have been unimaginable like only 10 years ago here. And the rate at which this sort of thing is just totally traumatizing, because that's what this is doing. It's traumatizing young people. And they don't know it at the time, but on the back end of this sort of thing, it's not a pretty picture,
right? And
all you have to do is look at what media that these kids are consuming. I mean, look at the kind of music that's targeted to them. I mean, the thing is, of course, I just hear
We'll get
British,
there.
the ghost of the. I hear the ghost of the British are off, saying, "Oh, listen to me, Mary Whitehouse worried about the kids listening to all that bad rock and roll music." But you cannot deny that, of course, this sort of thing is pushed very heavily on not just teenagers but children. From the kind of things that they see on for popular YouTubers, the things they're hearing in music, the things they're seeing in video all the time.
We'll get there. Arts and cultures and the lack thereof is a thing on the right column. But if I can address something before people get the wrong idea, I wasn't some isolated band student in high school. I did just about everything, and it wasn't just one high school either. I had the fortune or misfortune of having connections in other high schools and even visiting them at times. This isn't an isolated incident where I visited some other place and I was like, wow, it's much better here. So that's just kind of that's the lay of the land here. If I had any suspicions that this was just some isolated incident that is not normal, I would not be showing you all of this right now. So anything else before we keep going?
No, let's carry on.
All right. Okay.
Oh,
yes.
sorry, Tottenham. Hang on.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's someone in the waiting room that. I don't know if you want.
Red Hawk.
Red Hawk.
Oh yeah, this is my PUA Chad Alpha guy, who I thought I'd bring in for moral support.
Oh yeah.
How much of the stream have you caught so far, Red Hawk?
Well, I was listening to it on ×2 speed as I was hurrying away from work, and I caught maybe the first half hour or so.
Mm-hmm. Any thoughts that we haven't actually touched on so far in the discussion?
I'll just sit back for a moment here and jump in when necessary, because I'm just not sure what you guys have or haven't covered yet. How many autistic spurgs have been losing it in the chat so far?
I haven't been looking, to be honest. I only dread to think how many little pathetic ab-licking snack men weasel.
There's a lot of 2015
I haven't been looking at it either, but I have a report that that Charlemagne, one of the mods, has been having, quote, hungry hippo energy slapping down the Spurgs. So that's courtesy of Lumberg. That
you did make one point on Twitter, Red Hawk, that a lot of the guys who are on the DGen side of this argument are, let's just say, what did you say? What was your exact point? I can't remember now.
Oh, yeah, I was basically making the point that it's interesting that none of these guys are like Alpha Chad kind of characters. Dev positions himself as short fat otaku, and like on his channel his whole vibe is him sitting on like a box of pizzas, and he's just a not good looking dude. And I really don't want to take shots at V, because I think he actually does good work on a lot of things, but V was a furry once upon a time, so it's, I don't know, maybe it's some leftovers and stuff, and he just got married himself, so but
is this him here? Hold on, because I'm not actually familiar with this Dev character.
Yeah.
Is this the character here that we're talking about?
Could be. I don't know. I don't know what he.
I'll tell you.
I'm
waiting to see it come up. I'll tell you if it is.
Is that him there?
No, that is not Dev. No.
All right. Okay.
I will say I'm friendly with Dev, and I, as I said, I think he's a smart fellow. But we don't agree on many of these issues. But the Red Hawk is right. That is the image of. The image on his channel, the fat thing is pushed as a meme. So yeah, but
I see. Okay, right. Let me get the.
Yeah, we're right about to get to the really egregious thing.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah.
Okay, so sex toys openly discarded in the open. So it's a high school, ages 14 to 18. There are furries there. Like, it's a thing. They exist. They are very open about it. And I will let you all, with your imagination, try to fill in what it was that was left in the open, but it was found.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh.
So
was it a tail?
Yeah. So.
Oh, God.
And
I am black pilled beyond imagination.
We're still in the first column, man. Let's keep going. So, mass religious apathy. I don't know about you. I hear stories about people being like
Hold
very...
on. Stick with this sex toy business first.
Okay,
So,
right, okay.
how prevalent is that? Because
it's
come on,
happened a couple of times, and it's not just that. Other things intended for the feminine variety.
Okay.
I mean, keep in mind, of course, in this country, you can go to Poundland sells dildos and sex toys now. You know, so I don't know how common that is in America, but like you can literally go to Poundland and buy a dildo.
So that is a thing.
This was another push of feminism, by the way. I mentioned before. I remember somehow coming across this book that was written for like housewives in the 1980s about how to derive like sexual pleasure, that it's really important for women to feel sexual pleasure now. And like the entirety of this book was like, get on top and rub yourself, basically.
Okay.
But, sit on the washing machine. Yes. I remember that. I remember that push, and but of course, again, the internet now facilitates. It's very easy to get a hold of any of this stuff. Now,
why is that?
You don't have
why
to
is it so important for women to be like highly sexed in this way? Because I mean, let's face it. If you've ever met any women, they mostly aren't. I mean, I know Red Hawk's going to be like, may have some thoughts about this, but in my view, that is just like there'll be a little period there where they're into it, but women don't have the same sex drive as men. Never will do, ever.
No, and I've been getting in fights with people in your audience today about this, like a bunch of like gamma cope that like men and women have or should have the same sex drives, just absolute bollocks and complete nonsense. But I have a question for Turnip here. Like again, like I didn't listen like all the way up to this point, but is like the contention here that like this is like high school, like this is what like kids are doing. This is
this is here? This is mostly ages 14 to 18.
Okay. So I guess like the next part of this would be like, so is it like the opinion of the panel here that like the sex toy discussion is just completely degenerate, or is it degenerate that the fact that the kids are doing it?
I think it's bad that it's just out in the open and that it's just kind of going on. So there needs to be like, if it's going to go on, like so many things, I think it should go on privately, quietly, with a sense of shame about it.
Well, this is the thing. Way. I mean, of course, I mean,
many
of these things have been active in some degree or the other in society for millennia. I mean, speaking of the sex toy thing, you can find examples of them going back over 1,000 years. I mean, the question is, of course, what is the proper place and who is the proper audience for these things? I mean, these things have been normalized amongst children and are being normalized amongst children. Bringing up all of these questions of sexuality and pushing all of these things on people who don't even have the kind of legal, haven't reached the age of majority that they can vote, that they can drive, that they can do any of these things. So, I mean, yes, I mean, there will be these things in society, but the point is, where do you promote them? Do you allow them to become a part of the everyday discourse of children? And I think you would have to be really evil to say that that's a good thing.
Sex toys should be criminalized, and we should gather them all up and destroy them.
No, I mean,
I guess I get to speak for the degenerates here on this front, but
if you're selling it to children, I think at this point it is very reasonable to give them the Philippines treatment with drug dealers.
No, I quoted by Jonathan Bowden in my video, and Bowden was a little bit like he was kind of a Nietzschean reactionary, which is a kind of unique style, I guess, which means that he was what did he call himself, like a reactionary modernist, right? So but one of his big ideas was that all societies and cultures have these energies basically, and you can never destroy energy. You can never the full is like I mean, I talked about this before, like in Iran where they stone homosexuals, or in Indonesia where they whip homosexuals. It doesn't actually solve, like, you're never gonna destroy that energy because it's just like part of people. But what he talks about is that you can push it to different. You're never going to destroy it, but you can push it to different. You can push it up or you can push it down. And the trouble we've got is that all of this stuff is being pushed up and it's being featured at the top. Whereas in an ideal circumstance, it'd be much more like, I don't know, like Victorian Britain, where you have to go to like a seedy underground club and it could ruin your reputation if it was found out. Or, I mean, you know, Japan, in maybe not Japan now, but traditional Japan had a kind of similar thing where there is an outlet for these things, but it's something that it's something that you try to keep hidden, something that you don't celebrate. And this is the problem we've got now, is that we're completely without any sort of moral compass whatsoever. And these things, you're not allowed to. We're in a position now where you're not actually allowed to draw attention to these things as we are on the stream and to criticize them without, like, you know, all manner of freaking out. In fact, the only response that is allowed is you have to celebrate these things. You have to celebrate them before you know it, you know, this dildo thing you're talking about will be mandatory sex education in 20 years' time. You think I'm joking?
I'm sure it probably already is.
Well,
I'm sure it already is.
I remember a couple years ago seeing a video from Norway that was literally just explicitly pornography that they showed to children for sex education.
Well, do you remember that
about these things, right?
Do you remember that tweet from who was it who made the tweet about making pornography, like making child-friendly pornography? I can't remember who it was. It was someone.
Yeah, it was a. I think it was actually a freaking article that got published by somebody.
Well, there was also the daughter of someone in the British government. I can't remember who made some tweet about this, but anyway, yes. I mean, these things are, are being quite openly discussed, and I wouldn't be surprised if there isn't actual sort of discussion in certain schools about promoting these things. There's a very far cry from searching people's homes and caning them if you find these things and literally promoting them as a point of pride. I mean, there's probably a flag. I guarantee you there's a dildo pride flag.
Surely there is at this point.
So yes, pride.
Okay. Are we done with that vile point? Can we move on to the next one?
Yeah, it seems that AA has walked off for a moment, so shall we continue?
All right. So something else. This is going away from the sexual impurity side. Mass religious apathy. So it sounds like once upon a time there were a lot of people that were either ardently Christian or ardently atheist in the U.S. high school system, like the neckbeards versus the Christians and all of that. You don't get that anymore. Most people just are apathetic. They won't say that they're one or the other. They just don't care.
And this is all the time.
Well, yeah, and they don't even know it's nihilism. Like, these people they haven't looked into any of this. They haven't been brought up with it. They have no care to look into it. So they're just left with nothing. It's a void. It's invariable. They just don't have a religion, and they don't even know that they're nihilists. It's just mass apathy, and there are people that are Christians and there are people that are like assertive atheists, but I can count them on my hands again. And
it's not a culture anymore,
Right.
I mean, one of the things that struck me, I don't want to maybe jump ahead in your list, but this idea that there aren't really kind of cliques of people in school.
Yeah, we'll get there. That's
part of this, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's a main point that's going to be coming up. Something else.
Turnip, can I just say on the religious point?
Yes, sir.
I've called this stream the Coomer truth regime.
Mm-hmm.
A little play on my boomer truth regime. Somebody suggested that. I'll give credit, whoever you were. I'll give you credit in the. I've seen so many comments this past day. I can't remember who said it, but thanks for the suggestion. But one of the things that has struck me in all of this, and I found the same thing actually when I attacked the femboy nonsense last year as well.
We'll get there. Yeah.
In this environment where there is no religiosity, there isn't even the kind of new atheist religiosity, which was, let's face it, a kind of religion as well. it's almost like kink. You know, the idea that people have these fetishes and kinks becomes in itself a kind of quasi-religion. It's like the one sacred
Yes.
thing that you're not allowed to touch.
Yep.
You're not allowed to criticize in any way. You know, whatever you do, don't have a go at my, you know, fetish for women licking doorknobs or whatever it happens to be.
Yep.
I mean, why is it that this is held to be this is like the final sacred thing? You know,
the Zoomers, as I've been saying, have nothing. It's a blank landscape. Everything's been torn down. They aren't like Bolsheviks that are here to bring the avant-garde and take down the tradition. That's been done. The Zoomers are the generation that are being raised in or after the collapse. They have nothing. All they have is what is inherent to them. What is inherent to them? Pleasure. So that's like the only stimulus that they ever have. So if you attack it, it's like you're attacking like them.
Well, not to be a communist here, but I mean, I would say that part of the project of transnational capitalism has been to create a society full of perfect consumers. And the perfect consumer is not going to care about atheism. They're not going to care about religion. They're not going to care about anything else. They're just going to care about pleasuring themselves sexually, pleasuring themselves with food, pleasuring themselves with entertainment. Everything is about their pliant state of consumption. Yep. You know, and I think that's subtext in a lot of this. You know, the kind of, you know, getting men to worship strong women. You know, again, you and of course women in reality aren't really going to be able to fill that role. And so who has to step in and fill that role when you have a society full of broken people who have no aspirations, no dreams, no beliefs, or anything else? It's going to be corporations. It's going to be the state. They are going to become the de facto patriarch. They are going to control every aspect of your life, what they put into your body, what you're allowed to see, what transactions you're allowed to make. You know, I mean, we are breeding those blobby characters from Wall-E, you know, that ride about on their mobility scooters and just coom all day long. You know, because that is big business. You know, I would say.
Well, I made this point. Go ahead.
Okay, I think you're absolutely right. There was sex is just another commodity to sell, right? And I remember earlier this year, I was listening to a podcast, and the guy was quoting an article. I think it was written by like somebody at the Cato Institute or something. And I can't remember exactly, but it might have been Reason Magazine. But basically, the piece was bragging about how capitalism had spread, you know, sexual liberation around the world and sort of gay rights and all this sort of stuff. And
democracy, whiskey, sexy. I remember that from the Iraq War.
Yeah, and so I don't think, and again, like you, this puts me in sort of a weird position because, you know, I'm kind of steeped in Austrian economics and stuff, but I do think this is a problem that, you know, we have to address about, you know, to what extent markets sort of facilitate this kind of cultural rot.
Yeah, I mean, Austrianism, as far as I understand it, is a value-free analysis of human action. And so I don't think that you have to... I mean, I think there's this misunderstanding that, of course, this is capitalism. This is the end stage of all capitalism. This is the end stage of free markets. No, this is the end stage of a market in a society that has completely fallen apart.
Yes, it's the end stage of a market where the market was the goal.
Yes, yeah, and where there was no other goal.
Market for market's sake.
I do think though, if I was to be, you know, I don't want to be critical of Austrian economics, but if I was to be critical of libertarians, the logic of the market will tend towards the lowest common denominator, the cheap and nasty, as Carlyle called it, because you know, it is assumed in the value-free analysis that individuals make subjective evaluations on whatever it happens to be. Okay, but you know as well as I do that I mean, I'm sure that Jesus talks about this, that the correct path is often a lot more difficult than the path of temptation, that Satan will present the easiest possible option, whether it's drink, whether it's women, whether it's drugs, whether it's it's the easy choice. And often the difficult choice is, I don't know, I mean, Turnip, I can't imagine you go to many parties anyway, but it's like you've got your exam, your big exam, like in a day or something. Come out drinking with us, bro, or are you going to just stay in to revise just tonight, just to make sure that you do well on that exam? The easy thing to do is to go out. The difficult thing to do is to, in that scenario, is to actually do what you're meant to do. And anybody who wants to achieve anything at all, like if it's an athlete, for example, there are many, many things in your path that can take you away from achieving whatever the goal is that you've set yourself.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
And you're right, AA is very explicitly stated, of course, because Christ, you're openly told that, of course, this path is a path of suffering, as Christ suffered the ultimate made the ultimate sacrifice. So
the point
it is painful.
The point I want to make is that it is a libertarian fantasy. It's a fantasy to imagine that, it's just down to the individual. And I mean, my friend Liz, base Liz, I love her and everything, but she's often guilty of this, which is like, well, I will choose the right thing, of course, because I'm great. But the fact of the matter is that 99% of the public are NPCs. They're not base Liz. They're not people of strong will. They're people who are weak, who are people, all of us. I mean, we started this stream saying everybody to some extent is a degenerate. So in some cases, there need to be like robust mechanisms in place just to kind of push people a little bit to remind them of what the right option is.
We had that. At one point in time, there was a very strong and central church in most people's lives. There was a very strong and central family unit in most people's lives. And in fact, you would often see like market theories talked about in terms of households or families, which you don't see anymore because it's been determined that it's too inefficient for the market. The GDP is hampered by the fact that we're attached to such transcendent things as the church and the family. But once upon a time, we did have those, and it worked very well.
There's also something deeply subversive about the feminist undertone to all of this, about how when you just magically double the size of the workforce in 1965, your wages stagnate, and therefore, or whenever the hell it happened. But at the sexual revolution, where women are encouraged to go into the workforce, and therefore you have your wages stagnate, and it's much harder for young men to grow up and actually build families.
Well, it made it impossible.
Well, women aren't even given the dignity of being called women anymore. I mean, what are they, birthing persons, menstruating persons?
When the subject of abortion law comes up, then it's back to men and women. So don't take that all away. They're useful whenever we need to score political points.
Well, that is the highest sacrament of the liberated woman, is the abortion.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the highest goal of all women in the West is to sanctify the slaughter of their unborn child, but again, I mean, it's part and parcel of all this. We live in a society of deconstruction. Everything is geared towards taking things apart. Nothing is geared towards building anything up. And children are taught it. Now they're being taught it, literally from the youngest age, that everything is to be taken apart. So no wonder these children believe in nothing and have no values.
Shall we wrap up on this list, Turnip? Let's
yeah, we're still on column 1. Okay.
Yeah.
Complete inversion of the sexes. So this sounds like roles, but hold off on that for now. It is very common for most women to forego any form of self-control and you become fat. It's a common thing now, especially when looking at it historically. It's orders of magnitudes larger. They're becoming, large. I don't know what's the best way to put this, to try to convey what I'm trying to get across. And the men are just kind of letting that happen. And alongside this, the women are trying to subsume any sort of responsibility that men had that was seen as like, this is where the men are supposed to be. So, speaking positions, leadership, things like that. Women are trying to take that over as if it is inherently theirs, and they claim that it is. And the men are perfectly content to sit back and let that happen. So they're subsuming like the physical role of man. They're foregoing the physical role of man. They're foregoing the societal role of man. They refuse to take any sort of responsibility or leadership for anything. They're very submissive and voiceless. So what you end up seeing is oftentimes in like these school leadership stuff, high school, middle school, and all that, they will be majority women, and the men don't care. And I would chalk this down to the men weren't raised right. They should be becoming patriarchs in their own right, but they not only are they not taught to do that, they're taught that that is in some way bad. So this is what you end up with.
Yeah, they've been trained since they were, born, mostly by either female teachers in the school system or often, most cases, single mothers, that, the women's way is the correct way of doing things. And therefore, if we just bow down on our hands and knees at the feet of the woman, that is how we're going to get into their pants, which absolutely never works. And, yeah.
And something else is if they can't just invert what is happening, they'll just equalize it. So if they can't get the women to do something and the men not to do something, what they will instead do is they'll just equalize the actions and say, well, it's for everyone. This isn't unique to you. So in the end, what you end up with is you get essentially women that are trying to be men but can't because that is it's impossible. You get men that are voiceless, submissive. They refuse to take up their role as a patriarch or a leader, and they have nothing unique to them because now all that stuff is just for everyone. So that's kind of like the dynamic that's going on there. Any comments?
We've seen in a larger sense that men have no, men are not allowed to have social spaces of their own apart from women. That is literally been sort of ordered by the court in some cases.
Girls and the Boy Scouts. Yeah.
Yes, and it is a well-known fact that the educational system, certainly in universities, and I assume this is true in America, is, I would say, basically formulated and led by women, with feminine styles being the kind of dominant style in a school. And we've seen drastic shifts in the number of men certainly applying for secondary or university education.
And after the shutdowns last year, they haven't returned, thank God.
No. I mean it's a good thing. Yeah. It's a black pill, but the less people that go to university at this point, the better. The less people involved in government schools, the better. But there is definitely a feminine style to the way that most educational institutions are run, and I do think that is really terrible for boys in these institutions.
I think a large part of it that people may forget about as well, but it's a huge part of this culture that you guys are talking about. Is and I think Red Hawk, you and I may have talked about this before on Cigar Stream. Is the therapy culture that comes along with it? Everything is pathologized. Everything is psychologized.
Yeah, this is absolutely infuriating about how men should be dealing with their issues the same way that women do. It's always okay. So in like the red pill circles, we call it like gynocentrism, like gynocentric, female first social order. Like from everything that you see, all the movies, all the TV shows, everything you see is that the correct way to view something is the emotional way. The woman's way of doing something. The fact that men don't cry at the end of Titanic is therefore a bad thing. No, it's just that they're men. It's completely natural for men's proclivities for violence and for anger, and women's is for emotion and crying. And we have to try and blend these things together. Men just need to emote more. They just need to talk more. They just need to be more open with their feelings. It's like, no, they need to go hit the fucking gym and go punch someone in the face. It's fucking infuriating.
That's very base, but I think it's part of my Welsh heritage. I will cry at land of my fathers.
Yeah, me too.
But that's probably my own weakness.
One of the things I'll mention, for example, is that Mrs. A has been doing this course recently, and it's all this it's in this field of therapy and all that. And like every once in a while, she busts out like, "Oh, I think you've got ODD." What the fuck's ODD? oppositional,
self-diagnosis.
right? Oppositional defiant disorder. Even the best behaved children can be difficult and challenging at times, but if your child or teenager has frequent and persistent pattern of anger, irritability, arguing, defiance, or vindictiveness towards you and other authority figures, he or she may have oppositional defiant disorder. I mean, and my response is like, once upon a time, this just used to be called like personality. Why is everything pathologized?
Everything is a pathology. Everything is a disorder because in that case it can be medicated. It can be fixed. You know, you can go for your therapy sessions and have it brainwashed out of you. You know, you can take these pharmaceuticals and have it literally boiled in your brain.
I think men have to resist all of this bollocks, all of it.
Well,
like,
I think this also, I'll let you finish. Yeah, I think this is also.
You don't have ODD, you don't have ADD, you don't have all of these. You're just a bloke at the end of the day. This is what it boils down to.
Yeah, this goes to something even deeper though, because it's something that we're seeing these days where if everyone has like a personality or like one of these traits or something, this like traitism, as people will call it, that somehow the world like owes you something for that. Like, you know, the world needs to morph around you. Like, oh, I have this ODD or whatever the hell it is that they're saying people these days. So therefore you need to treat me a certain way. Or, you know, I'm autistic and you have to morph everything around it these days. And that's a way for like women to get through the world because they can always fall back on like their looks and their beauty to secure the resources from a man. But that is absolutely destructive for young men because the world isn't going to give you shit. Nobody cares about men. Nobody's going to look after you.
Do you think that's why they're literally... Do you think that's why they're literally becoming women in so many cases? Like, you know, dressing up like women, trying to be, because it wins you points in the feminine game, basically, because you can't really get Gibbs if you're a bloke, but you may get Gibbs if you're like a bloke in a skirt. Yeah,
I mean, you'd certainly get more attention. You could
do MMA fighting with a woman and beat her and declare victory. You know.
Speaking of blokes with a skirt, shall we move on to the next point?
Yeah, let's carry on.
Very good.
The next point is that there's very open and obvious cross-dressing for men, where men will wear skirts, dresses, you know, very tight shorts or pants, and of course it's been a thing forever now. Like the women will wear pants and, you know, men's clothing. There very, very rarely is there a woman that will actually wear something just feminine. It doesn't exist anymore, and the men will adopt for whatever reason, have seized the feminine clothing, or they're doing so. This was a minority of people, but it still existed to where you could come across it in the hallways on a fair.
Boys wearing skirts.
Yeah, or dresses or very short pants that are meant for women, you know, things like that.
Do you want to know something interesting? I used to go out with a girl who we played chess together. I was I didn't really go to chess club. I was a part of every single club going, but not to go to the club because it got you a free pass. If you were a member of a club, you could skip the lunch queue. So this was a very handy way of always but you kind of had to put an appearance in once in a while, otherwise they take the card away. So anyway, one of these clubs was chess. And I went out with this girl for a period, and she actually protested, and she wanted to be the first girl in our school to wear trousers to school. She protested, she picketed, and she took the school on to win the right to wear trousers. Now, what was fascinating at that time is that she got zero support from any of the girls in the school. Every girl in our school wanted to wear they used to wear really short skirts, and they didn't want to, because it was kudos for them. The shorter you could wear your skirt, the better type thing. But they didn't want to give that up. So basically, she got like mocked and rejected and ended up leaving school as a result of it. Like she got even though she won the right to wear the trousers, she ended up going to a different school because basically no other girls would do it. I find it interesting how it goes from that to being like completely dominant in the space of like one generation.
Yeah, a woman wearing like a skirt or a dress or something is like it's a luxury now, or a rarity. Like it's the
These are
exception. It
fancy.
looks, well, yeah, and it looks very beautiful. It's what they're supposed to be wearing, but we aren't graced with that anymore because they've, for whatever reason, have raged against their natural beauty and they've torn it down. And
and when you do get, well, the idea of femininity, dressing femininely, is to just dress like a slag. I mean, just dress as horrible and slutty as you possibly can. So that has completely subsumed any other ideas of what it means.
Now there's
to dress femininely.
there's some person in chat called Creative Username. He says, I don't get it. I just don't get it. He says, what's the problem with cross-dressing?
tell him to examine himself in a mirror and find out what he's actually supposed to be, and then apply that to the other men or women around him.
We've said this a number of times.
No, go ahead, D.
Well, I was just going to say, we said a number of times on the stream, the problem is when these ideas become normalized, celebrated, and pushed in culture, then you end up with situations where it starts to dramatically warp people's conception of themselves as men and women in culture, and the culture starts to fall apart, as we have seen. It has literally happened, and I don't think anyone can deny that. I mean, I don't understand why people have difficulty understanding this.
Right, now there's your answer, Creative Username.
Well, I was going to say one more thing about from the feminism.
There is sexual dimorphism in nature. There is sexual dimorphism in humans. It's always been a character of human cultures, almost universally, and so it's just hardwired.
So I remember when Jordan Peterson got in trouble with this, when he was saying about why you wear makeup and lipstick in the office and short dresses and everything. Well, the reason why women look beautiful is simply for, to attract men. And feminism has done a wonderful job of, from the day you're born, basically saying, I don't need no man. And that has gotten to the point of where you can't even dress like it because you cannot do anything expressly for the enjoyment of men. You are a bad feminist if you can, do that, the male gaze and all this crap. So they intentionally make themselves look ugly. You see it in all the media and all this crap, so you can't even look nice, because that's against the female order.
This is a material analysis, and it falls a bit short because it fails to recognize that there is a God-given beauty given to his daughters that they just openly revolt against and try to cut it down. They shave their hair, they wear men's clothing, they destroy their modesty. The material analysis may well be correct. Some of them might be either consciously or unconsciously doing that to attract a man, but it still does not change the fact that they have an inherent beauty about them that they're just openly destroying.
Yeah, but are they thinking that when they're doing that?
It doesn't matter. It exists whether or not they acknowledge it.
Well, I think it does, because that's how you go about actually fighting this and actually going about changing this.
Well, if you're trying to change this, then it might be a good idea to instill that knowledge back into them with the central church systems that we used to have in all of our lives a few generations ago, that told people, or told women, here's your inherent beauty, guard it jealously, and it told men, here is what you are supposed to be, this is the patriarch that you are supposed to grow into, become that. If you just distill it down to the material elements of it, you're going to end up right back here because there's no foundation underlying it.
Well, my argument would be, then how did we end up where we are then? If the church did this great job of instilling everything together, then how did it fall apart, and how did we end up where we are today? So because this is I got a problem with this part about the TradCon kind of thing here, because I don't see a way for you to go back. This seems 20th century
right, so there's
for
two
21st
things there.
century problems.
There's two things there. Okay, we'll get to the first one. Why did the church fail, quote unquote? It's because people rejected the church. The church cannot take a sword and force people to believe something. It's impossible. A person's belief is something that cannot be forced by another person. So whenever people start openly rejecting the church in favor of idols, they're going to do that en masse. It happens in a cycle. And then we're really surprised whenever those idols are torn down before us. And as for whether or not the church is capable to deal with a modern problem, the church has dealt with problems for over 2,000 years now. The fact that we're in a year beginning with 2, and it's in the thousands, that doesn't change the fact of it can handle that.
The other thing which the other thing which gets overlooked a lot, which is nevertheless true and very important, and I think not talked about on purpose, is the active subversion of churches across the West over the past 100 years. So a good example of this is that David Rockefeller basically set up all these seminaries, gave them tons of money, get them started. And the whole goal with them was to push ecumenism and, basically get them to disregard sort of the traditional morals of the faith, basically the dogma, in an effort to try and make everybody all kumbaya and sort of pave ways for sort of the new order. There's also a good book. I can't remember exactly I want to say Malachi Martin, but that's not who it is. It was some other Catholic scholar, and basically he showed pretty convincingly that the CIA infiltrated the Catholic Church during the Cold War, and that's sort of where you see a lot of the sort of stuff coming on now. And it had happened before to the Protestant churches before that. Yeah. So I think saying that, look where Christianity got us, look where the subversion of Christianity got us, I think is the better example. So the way to sort of deal with this is to try and create institutions which sort of are conscious of the subversion and try and have them operate outside of it. So I'm not sure you can go back, as you say, Red Hawk. But at this point, all I'm really concerned about is trying to preserve a remnant so that when basically things truly do collapse, hopefully we'll have something with which, and we can build something in a playbook that works. Essentially,
I just wanted to mention. I'll mention my speech at the event again. Obviously, I know nobody's seen it, but the people who, it was called "Culture is Downstream of Law," and the first whole segment of that speech dealt with how the Supreme Court, over a series of rulings, basically defanged the church. I'm trying to remember see if I can put up that. Do I have that speech here somewhere? See if I can find my speech of a minute. But there were a series of cases basically whereby where did I put that? Hold on a minute.
And I just saw someone in the comments.
Here we are.
While you're looking for that, AA, someone was saying that they're trying to do this with the Orthodox Church right now. That's actually true. The CIA has funded and basically backed schismatic breakaway groups within Ukraine in an effort to sort of cause division within the church. So the Moscow Patriarchate sort of condemned this as basically what it is, which is a CIA front using Ukrainian ultra-nationalists to try and cause division and whatnot. And this is nothing new.
So I found this. While I remember that creative username, Mods, if he talks again, just ban, please. We answered his question. Now he should just sit silently. If he talks again, but instant lifetime ban. Okay, so the cases I was talking about were Stone versus Graham, 1980, right? Which was based on a precedent of an earlier case, Abingdon School District versus Shemp, and then an earlier case again, Engel versus Vitale, 1962. The first case, Engel versus Vitale, ruled that it's unconstitutional to compose a prayer in public schools. Okay.
The school prayer case. Yeah.
Abingdon District versus Shemp ruled that state-sponsored Bible reading in American schools was unconstitutional. So no more Bible reading. And then Stone versus Graham was unconstitutional to have the Ten Commandments up on the wall. And this is a direct ruling from the Supreme Court that because pupils in the schools may see the words of the Mosaic law on the wall, this may induce children to read, meditate upon, perhaps to venerate and obey the commandments. So quite literally under US law since 1980, obeying the Ten Commandments is literally, it's written in the law there. You're not allowed to do that in schools because it's unconstitutional. So
now they're pledging allegiance to the pride flag. So You know, I mean, Turner, you will know all about this, but there is nothing in the documents, the founding documents of the United States, that says anything about separation of church and state. Is that true?
Okay, so the issue there is it's implied heavily, and they will look to other documents. They're not supposed to. We would say that that's obviously, they're meant to interpret these specific things. They don't. Right. They look to other things. And they always will say that it's absolutely implied, but right. the actual concept itself was never. It just says that you have the freedom for speech, religion, assembly, and all of this.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, there's a line that says Congress shall make no law concerning an establishment of religion. Yeah, okay. I'm just wondering because I can hear people typing the words church and state separation, and I don't think that occurs.
But my point is with the culture being downstream of law. If you strip away the church's ability to enforce or to have any weight behind it, okay, in actual law, and this is where I disagree fundamentally with libertarians and people who think church and state should be separated. If you're going to have a religion with teeth at all, it has to have some mandate to rule. It has to have some mandate to lay down laws, and there must be consequences that the church can enforce. If the church can't do that, of course, you're going to end up with massively declining church attendance, massive decline in religiosity, the rise of pseudo-religious symbols in its place, like fucking George Floyd and the rainbow flag. Of course you are.
Right. With the acceptance and the proliferation of contraception among these people, look at how many people should have been born to these churches but weren't. That's another source of decline, and it's been pushed mercilessly from your elites.
Yeah, and this idea too that you know there no total separation of church and state is just bollocks. Because I mean, and the reason we know this is if you just look at the United States, different states had established churches prior to the Constitution, and they had established churches after the Constitution, and it was never assumed at the time of the Constitution that those specific individual states, churches would be, non-constitutional. What it meant was that the federal government would not have a federal religion because they respected federalism, and that states should have the authority to sort of conduct those particular affairs.
The problem we've run into now, of course, is that given looking at the state of the mainline Protestant churches, I wouldn't really want them to have the force of law behind them. I mean, God knows what would happen.
The mainline shifts with each and every generation. The Lutheran one is in your lifetime. In fact, it didn't exist when you were born, probably.
Now, folks, I've just realised it's 20 past 12 here, so we're going to have to
speed run it. Okay,
and there's loads of super chats.
Okay,
we must pick up
speed running. So something else that was there: contraception was left in the open. Very obviously, you could go into the bathrooms and probably find any collection of used or unused methods of contraception. And oftentimes, for instance, I had friends in the robotics club. They would make robots and literally fight them against other schools in competition. It was in the basement of the high school, and it was flooded with sewage because of a complication caused by people flushing too much contraception down the toilets. Next point, very little covering worn by women. So this is your typical and stereotypical argument that the women are wearing less and less and showing more and more. It hasn't stopped.
Yes.
Yeah, it has not stopped at all. It's just another form of immodesty, and it's to the point where sometimes they will wear a shirt that is longer than their pants.
I mean, one of the things I noticed in the past few years, I don't know if this happens in America, but the skin tight leggings, where it's just you can
that's a thing here,
see your ass
all over the place.
No, that is very where do you look? Because I don't know where to look. I mean, I'm talking about
just don't look at them.
Don't look at women.
It's just like what can you it's like so I really don't like that. I really don't like that. Some things maybe if people are saying AA just wants Sharia law, but I mean I saw a very good.
I don't want Sharia law. I just want the typical Christian method of dress.
I mean, there's there has to be some sort of moderation. I saw a very good meme just now, by the way, where it was if you can imagine a European man in 1600 pointing to the tribes who didn't wear clothes and saying savages, right? And then fast forwarding to 2021 with the Islamic people all covered up, pointing to the basically naked Westerners and saying savages.
And if the Westerners point, if the Westerners point to themselves and call them savages and they're undressed, you get other Westerners behind them saying, "Oh, you're a prude."
Exactly.
It's standards. So the fact that we don't have standards is what has led to this list, and it's the reason that the Zoomer generation is just growing up in a void.
I still think this analysis is missing a little bit about just like the way human beings naturally are when they evolved. Like this seems a lot of like about the transcendent to me, but you know, and this is going to sound also like misogynistic, but it's not as well. But you know, women's only agency in this entire world is their sexuality, because they are the more vulnerable sex. So there's a reason why at any protest you see women, the first thing that they immediately go to is getting naked. The first thing they immediately go to is showing off more of their body. Okay, this is something that is innate in women's, I guess you would call it like survival strategy. I guess you can call it that way in the past and everything like that. This is something that's built into the cake, and I don't think it's just coming from the fact that our civilization sucks and has fallen from religion and such like that. I think there's something also, there's something else here as well.
I mean, are we actually going over the 2017 talking points? I mean, if so, there's only one kind of woman that goes to a protest and then actively prostrates herself nakedly. It's not the Christian women. It never was the Christian women. In fact, the most or the largest protests that we have in this country are women marching in Washington against abortion. They are finely dressed, and then every time you get the irreligious left women, you see exactly what you're describing. What you're describing is man in the state of nature, like the original sin man. So you have Christians that try to resist that. So then you get women acting as they actually are supposed to. And that's what our civilization was based off of. And now that that is gone, it's declining. I don't see how this line of reasoning is in any way flawed.
I will also say that it's not that I think that this also has to come from men. I mean, the problem is that you also have men behaving in ways that are shameful, and ways that are immoral, and ways that and ways that are brutish, and that reinforce these other behaviors. I mean, we also have to expect certain behavior from men. I mean, there are ways that men act in 2021 that would not have been acceptable, 40, 50 years ago. It wasn't the way a gentleman acted. Certainly anyone that aspired to be a gentleman of any sort. So I also don't want this to, far be it coming from me, but I don't think this is just the fault of women. I think it's also the responsibility of men giving up the proper behavior of a man.
Oh yeah, of course not. We're in the position we are because men have become completely effeminized and weak. Like this is the reason why we are where we are.
Do you want to carry on? I do have an Evola quotation about that talking point as well, which I'll share it when I can find it. But let's carry on going through these.
On to the right column. We're finally on the right column. We're halfway done.
Zoom through these. Okay.
So this is something that is not as hot button. There's a complete ignorance of art. You have people, aged 18 that might be able to point out that that's the Mona Lisa because they saw it in a movie one time. You have some people that might be able to point out that they can recognize maybe a famous classical piece or a romantic piece, but they don't know the name. But that's about it. You get people that are connoisseurs in modern pop music. That's fine, but it's usually just that one genre. Very rarely you'll get this minority of people that are big into like the sort of like punk or the rock side of things, and delve down into that, and they are aficionados in of themselves. They have an appreciation for art, but they're in like the 20s or the 30s in their count. And then you have maybe 6 or 7 people that like music pre 1870 or so. Outside of those, like, let's be generous and say 40 people, you just have no regard for any art outside of what is now. And look at the art that is now. It's not there because they aren't consuming it because it's beautiful. They're consuming it because it has like pleasurable stimulus. The music isn't designed to portray any sort of beauty. It's designed to create stimulus, and that's what Zoomers thrive on because it's all they have. They were born with stimulus, and that's the only thing that stayed sort of constant, and it's the only thing that like has any sort of euphoria associated with it. Like that's it. There is a void in art. Everything is torn down, and this is what is left. The people, they haven't been educated in it. They have no care for it. It's just what's available to them most immediately that produces the most stimulus. Any comments for that, or can we keep going?
I think we should try to get to the end of this list personally.
All right.
Unless anybody has anything else to say.
There is there's a proliferation of marijuana and hard drugs in the middle schools. So proliferation of drugs in the high schools is an old topic dating back to the 90s or so, the 80s maybe. That's old news. It's still there. Maybe intensified more now that you have high schoolers that can go and legally purchase marijuana. Like it's amplified. It's still there. People don't care anymore. So it's happening. But now it's in the middle schools. So ages 12 to 14 or 15 or so, maybe a bit younger if you have someone on the young side in the 6th grade. You have middle schoolers that can get ready access to these things, and they start very young. And it's not just marijuana in the middle school. Sometimes you can get a bit harder of drugs. Next, you get proliferation of premarital sex in the middle schools. I think we've covered that already earlier. I think I jumped the gun on that. But once again, you have that age range there. That's when they're starting. Here's something that my friend and I discussed last night at great length, because he is studying engineering. He's a good artist. He's a good painter. There is like no creativity among the Zoomers. They don't produce anything. They don't have any ideas. Like the NPC meme, it's like that, but there's only ever static inside of it. Like they don't have like an artistic spirit at all, and they don't have a drive to want to have one or want to learn or anything. That's just kind of like the void.
I would push back on this and I would push back on this in the sense of that I don't think creativity is what needs to be encouraged. I think we talked about this the other last week on that art stream. I think what needs to be encouraged is the involvement in and perfection of a technical craft first and foremost. I mean,
but they don't even try to do that.
Of course, this is. Well, that's what I mean. But this is tied to all of these other things. Of course, you're not going to have ideas. You're not going to have any sort of insights. You're not going to have anything on which to base your artwork if you're not reading, if you're not participating in culture, if you don't have any kind of sort of experience in life. It's not that the young people aren't creative. It's just that they have no sort of foundational place to kind of build up these skills with which to express the sort of ideas.
All right, well, that's about what I'm talking about. Like, unless you have like people that actually have a conscience, the most that they'll end up doing is like just doodling in their notes. Like that's about all they ever try to do. And then even people trying to pursue a higher talent or skill, you don't really get those. They just kind of go through the motions and memorize things. They don't. Like you might get a very talented musician here or there that can do good. In the entire time in high school, I think there were maybe 3 of those out of the multiple hundreds that were in that program. But like you don't get this interest and you don't get this drive. It's just gone.
Isn't that how it always was though? Because like the Pareto distribution, we have. I mean, I think it's easy to look back in the hindsight of history. We have all these great people doing these great things. And like today, I mean, I'm not denying that like the people today like aren't creative and aren't doing anything awesome and stuff like that. But I don't know. This seems a little.
I'm talking about. Yeah, go on.
Well, I would say these are the kind of the weakest points because
okay, well, maybe
again,
so,
my anti-egalitarian point that most people aren't suitable to be involved in art.
Right, and I'm not saying that they should become some high artist. I'm just saying the fact that there's not even like a drawing here or there. Like people don't even try to just do basic drawings.
Would you expand this to sort of like sort of other hobbies like knitting or things like that?
It doesn't
sort
exist.
of just general interest. Yes, so young people just basically are sort of bereft of these kind of interests.
Yeah, and
interests.
in fact, if you know someone that is a quiltist, that is going to die because no one knows how to do it in this generation. No one cares to know how to do it. No one has any sort of familial connections to learn because they've forsaken their families. Like quilts, like I can see it being very possible that it's going to become like a forgotten art.
Yeah.
Like just
I think a lot of it is kind of what you were talking about, D, is my impression of a lot of young people is they just don't do anything. Like they're not they
can seem to. I mean, they are passive. They're passive consumers. They watch things. They don't do things.
Yeah,
right. And
exactly.
And you would sometimes get children that would like to take apart things, whether or not they cared about how it worked. They would just take it apart. We don't get that anymore. Like I know one person that did
trait,
that.
I think, yeah.
There was one person that I know that did that.
Because that's the road to certainly to sort of being an engineer, a mechanic, and the trades and things like that. But no, but I think the larger point is certainly true and terrible. But it's part of all of this kind of erosion of everyone into a consumer class. Anyway,
I just have a question, just sort of as a benchmark for that turnip. Like, how many high school bands do you have? Like, I mean, like just students who are like buddies who like start rock bands or whatever. Did that happen at all?
We had one, and it's not exactly. We had a town of like 23,000 people, so we're not exactly
because
nowhere.
Just to put that in sort of perspective, like when I was in high school, like that was kind of a big thing, and this was kind of before your time. I guess I'm a millennial, and I grew up in a town of like maybe 10,000 people.
Yeah.
And I think we had like probably at least 5 different bands that sort of like spawned from this one.
Yeah, we got one, and I think it's since disbanded because they ran out of time to do it or they lost interest or something.
Yeah, but I mean, this was a real thing. Like there was a big interest in sort of stuff. There was like subcultures of music, people who were like really into like whatever, like metalheads or whatever. That was kind of a big thing, or people who are heavy into athleticism, or people who are just had a, it's kind of like what Dee was talking about, even just different hobbies, tinkerers, people who tinkered on things. Like my little brother is sort of that way. He's just like fixing his dirt bike and stuff like this, and putting lights on his car and shit, stuff that he thinks is cool. And I just feel like a lot of people aren't even just doing that, normal people things that people would do to fill up their time in a constructive way is just not there, it seems.
Right. So like that's the point I was trying to get across there. It's a very abstract thing, and I guess like I can't really convey it well. It was just like an environment that I was immersed in for 4 years. I don't have words to put it to. Sorry. The next point was that there is. I used the word because I didn't have a better one to describe what was happening. There's simping to extreme levels, and it is very common. You don't have men that actually want to like seize their mantle as the patriarch, that do things and then have women going after them. No. Men have sat back and they become submissive, voiceless, and the opposite of what they're supposed to be. So they chase after women. And the women now they essentially pick which men they want, and they have like between 3 or 5 men that will orbit them. It's disgusting, and it often turns into like those previous points from the left column of polyamory or cuckoldry.
It was ever thus, though, wasn't it? Red Hawk?
It's more extreme now.
Correct, AA. This is.
Yeah, I was going to say this seems like a very common
now,
thing.
it's definitely gone overboard in the recent times, for sure. I 100% agree with that. But this is like most men are betas, and most men will use this as their mating strategy. And as we went through on our cigar stream a couple weeks ago, these are the guys that are going to get the scraps left over from the Chads. You know, I mean, there's a reason why the first age of marriage in the West right now for women is 30, and conveniently it's right around the epiphany phase, and this is when they need the security, so they will go for these beta simping guys.
Yep.
After they've been ran through a bunch.
Right.
Now, in the interest of time, in the interest of time, folks, can we just skip to this last one, which just strikes me as the most interesting one left? Because
I really wanted to get to like that one that we were just about to get to, just because it's particularly open discussion of pornography and pornographers. Like, they will bring the pornographers up by name. They will just openly discuss it in public. My peers, the people in my class, like, I'd just be standing around and overhear it being talked about in the hallways and the practice rooms.
I can't name any pornographers.
Well, I can't either.
Hugh Hefner, maybe, I don't know.
Well, not people running the business.
Al Goldstein.
Yeah.
But
there's to the point. There's memes. You know, I follow this account called Liminal Spaces, which just posts like pictures. I don't know of like, you know, some weird quote liminal spaces, and they posted one. I don't know, the other day. It was just like this sort of black sofa, and you know, just looked like an office. And I was like, well, what's the point of this? But apparently, it's a set that's used in some sort of pornography. You know, it's like used over and over again. And like everyone in the replies knew exactly what this was. You know, I had no idea. Yeah, I would say that you're absolutely right about that. Or, you know, you'll see memes that use like the what is it called? Pornhub, like that sort of intro. And, you know, I mean, these things have become to the point where, you know, people are kind of expected to know what these things are.
With all due respect, I don't need to be affirmed that I'm correct about this, because I had to sit through it and listen to it for 4 years.
All right,
I'm disgusted by it. I don't have the words to tell you how little patience I have left for people that are like that, because I had to sit through it for 4 years and just listen to it in the background. Drove me to my wit's end.
I really want to get to this last one, Turnip, because I cannot, as some people may know, I wrote a novel when I was 18, which was all about cliques, and it was all about how all schools work, and I prided myself on coming up with basically the universal rules of all schools, down to exactly when certain splinter groups would emerge. You know, there was a cool group and an alternative cool group, and all of the different little.
Are you going to release this book?
Little identities that people gave themselves. You know, I have hated the trucks. You know, I've always been a natural born elitist, and my first kind of shot across the bows was this novel that I wrote.
You need to release it, eh? People need to read this.
Which is dripping with contempt for essentially people in my own school. But I cannot get my head around, like, if there were no cliques, then my analysis of all schools would cease to work. So explain this to me.
Okay, so you get friend groups, like the cliques, in its most skeletal form is still there. But, okay, so let me give background to this. My friend and I, we listened to one of the articles that Skeptical Waves put out, and it was about like the different like hierarchies and tiers of schools and all that, and the different cliques that will form. And we were listening to it, and we came to the realization he's talking about a different era, because we just don't. There is none of this. There is no like nerd clique. There is no athletic clique. There is like maybe the closest thing you can get is a clique of preppy girls, but even then they don't have like a uniting thing. They aren't in the same activity. They don't have the same interests. They just kind of look the same. And that's not it. The other groups don't look the same, so that's not like the common factor here. So we even tried to make a map where we took people that we knew, and then that didn't work. We tried to group them together, see what their common interests were. There was none. We took another one where we just started with the interests and tried to put people in them. It didn't come up with the friend groups that were there. It didn't exist, and I was in these.
There's problems there's problems, Turnip. Hold on, there's problems with your analytical lens here, Turnip, I'm afraid, because had you read my classic novel, which is basically my version,
is it out?
Right, it was my version of Catcher in the Rye. You would know that, for example, there are no the idea of the female friendship group is not real.
Okay, well,
You only get little kind of little triangles, little groups of. So in the female world, everything is very how can I say, like heterogeneous. Okay,
yeah, great.
The only area where you get the big group, the big clique, the big is in the male world among men.
Well, we don't
You said
have
triangles. So would these be elitist triangles?
No. I'm saying what I'm saying is on the male side, and there is an elitist triangle in that as well. But
yeah, I was joking. I'm sorry.
But yeah, on the male side, at least in my school and in most schools that I've ever talked to people about, it all came down to like, okay, you had the sports hierarchy, the boys who'd be picked first in football and rugby, who would then gain a certain amount of popularity from that. They'd gain girls from that. They'd gain prestige from that. Then you had another marker of prestige was hardness. By which I mean like being able to beat people up and so on. There was a certain, like among some of the rougher kids, there was some
gone.
prestige. What do you mean gone?
These things just haven't manifested. They don't exist. We thought about this and it didn't come up.
What?
It doesn't. There is no clique or group or person with these orbiters that just manifested. They didn't exist when I was there.
I would suggest that perhaps this role in society and socialization has been subsumed by the internet. That now people are kind of finding their kind of social groups rather than in school. They're finding them online. That
was the conclusion that we came up with, is that we are no longer forced to just socialize with each other only. So people have obviously gone and made outside connections that we can't see.
Right.
Like that was the only.
Hold on. There's no football.
I mean, look at the cool people you.
Yeah, there is a football team, but it's like atomized. They don't stick together as the football team. They just associate with like random people that seemingly make no sense if we use your analysis.
This is not cool. Bring back bullying, I say. Damn it.
Okay. I mean, you can tell me not to believe my lying eyes, but this is how it was for the 4 years that I was there. And remember, in 4 years, you see the 3 classes above you and the 3 classes below you. It was just like that.
I'm not happy with this. There can't be a lack of the groups. How will men get socialized?
No, there were friend groups. People weren't just sitting on their phones and completely atomized, but they weren't interest groups. They weren't cliques. They were just friend groups.
Men aren't getting. I would say men aren't getting socialized.
Tell me, bullying went on, Lieutenant, please.
Sometimes.
Not enough.
Not enough. No.
I mean,
all right.
Bullying will literally get you. Bullying will get you expelled these days.
It will get
bullying
you
is like
as well.
It's one of those.
The state will prosecute.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's one of those sacraments of modern education. The anti-bullying thing. I mean, your whole life will get fucked up if you bully. Yeah. So, yeah.
Direct result of more feminine involvement in the education system.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. So just before we hit these super chats, folks, I did find the bit from Evola, and I think it's probably quite important, to read like how he thinks about this as a problem. Okay, and I'd be interested to hear Red Hawk and others come in on this as well. He's talking about this problem that we've been talking about all stream, which is feminism and gender inversion and how this happens. He says this is the case of our contemporaries as far as woman is concerned, and yet it was not possible that a world has overcome, to employ a Jacobin term, the caste system by returning every human being his or her own dignity and rights, can preserve some sense of correct relationship between the two sexes. The emancipation of women was destined to follow that of the slaves, and the glorification of people without a caste and without traditions, namely the pariah. In a society that no longer understands the figure of the aesthetic and of the warrior, in which the hands of the latest aristocrats seem better fit to hold tennis rackets or shakers for cocktail mixes than swords or scepters, in which the archetype of the virile man is represented by a boxer or by a movie star, if not by the dull wimp represented by the intellectual, the college professor, the narcissistic puppet of the artist, or the busy and dirty money-making banker and the politician. In such a society, it was only a matter of time before women rose up and claimed for themselves a quote-unquote personality. I love how he puts personality in quotation marks. And a freedom, also in quotation marks. According to the anarchist and individualist, meaning usually associated with these words. And while traditional ethics asked men and women to be themselves to the utmost of their capabilities and to express their radical traits with their own gender-related characteristics, the new civilization aims at leveling everything, since it is orientated to the formless and to the stage that is truly not beyond, but on this side of the individuation and differentiation of the sexes. What truly amounts to an abdication was thus claimed as a step forward. After centuries of slavery, women wanted to be themselves and do whatever they pleased, but so-called feminism has not been able to devise a personality for women other than by imitating the male personality, so that the woman's claims conceal a fundamental lack of trust in herself, as well as her inability to be and to function as a real woman and not as a man. Due to such a misunderstanding, the modern woman has considered her traditional role to be demeaning and has taken offense at being treated, quote, only as a woman. This was the beginning of a wrong vocation. Because of this, she wanted to take her revenge, reclaim her, quote, dignity, and prove her, quote, true value, and to compete with men in a man's world. But the man she set out to defeat is not at all a real man, only the puppet of a standardized, rationalized society that no longer knows anything that is truly differentiated and qualitative. In such a civilization, there obviously cannot be any room for legitimate privileges, and thus women who are unable and unwilling to recognize their natural, traditional vocation and to defend it, even on the lowest possible plane, since no woman who is sexually fulfilled ever feels the need to imitate and to envy man, could easily demonstrate that they too virtually possess the same faculties and talents, both material and intellectual, that are found in the other sex, and that, generally speaking, are acquired and cherished in a society of the modern type. Man, for his part, has irresponsibly let this happen and has even helped and, quote, pushed women into the streets, offices, schools, and factories, into all the, quote, polluted crossroads of modern culture and society. Thus, the last leveling push has been imparted. And whatever the spiritual immaculation of materialistic modern man did not tacitly restore the primacy typically found in the ancient gynocentric communities of the woman ruling over men enslaved by their senses and at her service, the results have been the degeneration of the feminine type, even in her somatic characteristics. And then I'm going to skip on a bit, blah, blah, blah. He says, the same holds true for the results of Western emancipation of women, which is on its way to infecting the rest of the world faster than a plague. Traditional woman, or the absolute woman, in giving herself, in her living for another, in wanting to be only for another being, with simplicity and purity fulfilled herself, belonged to herself, displayed her own heroism, and became superior to ordinary men. Modern woman, in wanting to be for herself, has destroyed herself. The personality she so much yearned for is killing all semblance of a female personality in her. So Evola, in a way, sees this problem as fundamentally a problem that men have allowed to happen, and it's a problem of the modern world, because the sorts of men that are required to enforce these gender norms are the sorts of men that the mass society, the one that you've been talking about, D, just doesn't produce. There are no athletes. There are no warrior men. There are just kind of
because
men,
and I would go further to say that those those types are dangerous to this order. I mean, we've seen, like, you know, the state of the US military, what they've done to the US military in the past, you know, 20 years or so, or more, perhaps. You know, we've seen what they do to people who they deem dangerous to the regimes of the world, and I think that's absolutely true. Oh, the warrior, you know, the aesthete, the cleric, all of these types, the types that were the cornerstones of society in the past, are a threat to the current order.
He actually talks about a radical polarity. He says the more a man is a man, the more a woman is a woman.
That's 100%
and this is what I
true.
wanted to ask Red Hawk about, because you will have gone on journeys that most people here wouldn't have gone on with your PUA stuff. But has that been your finding, that the more you fulfill, you know, stereotypically masculine traits, the more kind of, quote, womanly the woman will become?
Yeah, that's absolutely 100% true. And there's like I guess the way I could best put it is, like, there's this thing going around where people just absolutely will write off immediately anyone who's, like, even, you know, left of, you know, the most decent right winger, you know, and just immediately write off that woman. But the thing is, like, pretty much every single woman these days is a left wing person, and you can mold them very easily, I might add, if you are the strong masculine man. I have, like, my main plate right now is somebody who was very much on, like, the feminist side, and now I've got her knitting. So, I mean, like, through enough time, if you are, like, the strongest masculine guy, they absolutely will change for you. And we basically live in the world of, like, that's ruled by gammas these days. But because women don't want to screw gammas, it's actually inadvertently become the age of the Chad. What feminism has done, instead of giving power to women, it's actually given power to the top 10% of men, who can now just completely have their pick of the litter of all men and have absolutely no incentive, you know, to settle down at all, because they could just have, like, a different woman every single night. So instead of liberating women, it's actually just made it amazingly, you know, feast or famine for the best of the men, and pretty slim pickings for most of the other ones.
And I would say the incredibly dark thing is that to a certain point, women will start to look to, let's say, other cultures where these masculine archetypes are still more upheld than they are in I would say white European culture. You know, they will start to look elsewhere for their men, and already have in many cases.
Yeah, Sweden, for example.
Yeah. Refugees welcome. I would definitely agree with sort of what Red Hawk has said. Like, my wife, when we met, she was already, you know, pretty culturally conservative, you know, church going. Her dad kept her on a short leash, and it paid off. And then, you know, she handed her off to me essentially. And basically, ever since we've married, you know, she's basically adopted, you know, softer, kinder version of my politics essentially. And yeah, I think that influence, that male influence on women in terms of, you know, Red Hog was talking about in terms of, you know, mentality, that is certainly true. And if you just sort of stick to your guns and, you know, just are clearly the head of the household, they'll more or less sort of get in line.
But this was also one of the things I was, you know, Poe the Person gave quite a controversial speech at the event. And my contention was that, to a certain extent, yes, women may agree with certain aspects of it, but they're also never going to be, like, fully based in red pill, because fundamentally they don't understand the absolute masculine characteristics that Evelyn was talking about there, which are they're just not going to get it. Like, I mean, even in our little chat there, Poe was saying, like, everybody was saying, like, they're getting super fed posty, and Poe was like, I just don't get violence, you know. It's just like, it's kind of not, that drive is kind of subdued in women.
Yes, it's not in the nature of. I don't think it's in the nature of women. I mean, you know, if you think about the kind of sort of traditional roles of a woman, I mean, these are roles that are meant for the protection and nurture and care of children, and those are not going to include, you know, going out and slaying your foes. Those are not going to include, you know, the you know, the kind of enforcement of order and things like that. Those are going to be qualities that that are useful for this idea again of nurturing, protecting children. And I think that partially so many of the things that have gone wrong in our civilization is that it's become this kind of pathological femininity. It's this kind of the kind of ghost of all of these traits that make a woman a positive force, kind of removed of their responsibilities, removed of their kind of purpose, and which they become, and then of course I think these forces become malevolent. It becomes the kind of woman who wants to pin you down and vaccinate you. It's the woman who wants to strap 8 masks on her child's face. Or your child's face, even worse. I think a lot of these forces, these dark forces, are kind of the pathological remnants of a previously positive feminine force in the world.
These are all downstream of what I describe as risk aversion, essentially. It's like, I talked about the war element. I think most women would think first of the risks. It's the safety first thing, and that's very much the society we're living in now. You can see with the coof more than anything else.
Yeah, and of course a woman is going to be a gatherer. And of course, what is a consumer is a kind of a kind of postmodern gatherer. Again, the warrior spirit of masculinity is not compatible with 21st century consumer culture. And so of course it becomes this kind of warped feminine instinct to kind of nurture and gather and protect. And we've seen what's happened. It's turned our societies into complete nightmares.
Well, there's something else to be said on top of that too, D, and some people might want to point at a certain group for this, but women on average spend, I think it's something like 75% more than men do, and they spend more money when they're single. It's something like how men are accountable for $23 trillion and women spend $38 trillion. On the market. So there's an incentive by, Global Homo to keep women single in order to keep them as big spenders as well.
So they keep them as big spenders. Keep them as dependent upon the state for their medical needs. Keep them as dependent upon the state for their kind of sustenance. It's all of a piece, because of course it all directs power towards these terrible kind of middle manager types that of course Evola decries as the kind of condition of weak modern man.
So there are quite a few super chats, folks. There's going to have to be quite a lot of super chats and not that much talking, sadly. So you ready to bang these out? Okay. Coney, some points on this saga. Number 1, the pos doesn't like women staying as tomboys. They want women who are to fully transition into men. 2, arguments against your video were very weak. This coming from someone who didn't agree with it entirely. 3, you are right to be concerned about men reacting like teenage girls to muscled women. They are the straight equivalent of bottoms. So
that last
there we are.
Point.
Yeah.
Here's the Eunuch says, I have my discordant dragon stream with Semiagog and Don the Pleb in 1 hour. Please no snipe. Sorry about this, Years. It wasn't planned, but I thought we basically had to do this. You can see there's a lot of people who've been watching this, and we basically had to do it today. Coney says only AA would hyphenate the word blowjob. Okay, fair enough. I
do think it is properly hyphenated, by the way, or at least it used to be.
Yeah, I should stop sharing my private scripts and notes on things, because people I do actually put footnotes in my own script as well, as people know. Leica says tomboy abs to feminine penis timeline. Time Stealer says, I'm trying to be as polite about this as possible, but do we know if Boris Johnson was in Oklahoma about 18 to 19 years ago?
Sorry, what? I missed that.
He's basically suggesting that Boris Johnson could be your father secretly because of your form.
It wouldn't take much to turn your hair into a Boris do.
I just kind of have to do this enough a lot, and it just kind of does that.
That's a hilarious comment. Whoever said that in the chat, good for you.
Narco Republican says Prude AA is my favorite AA. unfortunately, even you fall short of my own ultra Puritan standards. Degens, including AA, get out. You see, the thing is that I am not arguing for Puritanism or for prudery. What I'm saying is, it mustn't be put front and center. It must be kept down and kept private and kept be shamed and so on.
We're just arguing for morality, not Puritanism.
Yes,
Yeah.
everything in its right place. You know.
And listen, you know, I mean, Dee's older than me, but I'm in my late 30s, and there's nothing I haven't seen. I've seen it all, you know, in real life and on fucking, you know, and I dread to think what you've seen, Dee, but it's like,
oh, you have no idea. If there's anyone that's qualified to speak about the depths of degeneracy, it's certainly me. You know,
I'm
yes.
not talking. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is the you have to have a moral center to a society, and it
Yes.
can't
Well,
be.
that's
And
what
it
I'm-
can't be one that can't recognize the fact that these young men are putting themselves in teenage girl positions. It just can't be.
And that's sort of what I mean. You know, I have seen, you know, I mean, and not just degeneracy, but just seeing how the world works and seeing over time how things have changed, how things are falling apart. It's taken me a long time to come to some of the realizations, and it probably, if you would have caught me like 3 years ago, I've never been a kind of left-wing person. I think I'm fairly unique in these circles. I never made a journey from left to right, but
Yeah,
I
same.
certainly would have had much more kind of laissez-faire views just a couple of years ago. But I think some of the things that we've all seen just in the past few years, I don't see how it couldn't drive people to these conclusions.
Macho Man Cringe Savage says, I keep having postprandial somnolence, e.g. food coma. Does anyone know how to stop this? I don't... what's
Stop
food
eating
coma?
so many carbs, you pig.
Years the Eunuch says, the destruction of patriarchy leads inevitably to chaos, and the forces of evil then invert everything natural, everything divine. Male becomes female, right becomes wrong, God becomes self. That's pretty profound, Years. Correct. Absolutely correct. Chiaro Scuro. I mean, and look, you know, there's people like Years, there's many people, and the way I put it before, we're all people who've been, I don't want to say like damaged by the modern world, but we live in it. We swim in these waters, and yet everybody finds a time where it's like, actually, these old concepts of right and wrong, good and evil, they were there for a reason. You can't just rip up centuries and centuries of tradition and expect things not to go to shit. You know, there were people on Twitter earlier on saying, this is just arbitrary. It's not fucking arbitrary. It's not arbitrary. It's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of revealed ancient wisdom and tradition. You can't just.
But it takes wisdom to realize that. I mean, again, so many of the people you're arguing with are, I would say, either real adolescents or they're spiritually adolescents. You know, I think people remain adolescents for far longer than they used to. But you know, you're dealing with people who again, they still fundamentally think of the world in the terms of a child. Give me that now.
There is nothing more arrogant and hubristic than believing that you, as an 18-year-old or 20-year-old or 50-year-old or even an 80-year-old man, okay, somehow know better than literally generations upon generations upon generations of your forefathers. But you know better now. Somehow you've got it all figured out. This is the and it's not just those people I'm arguing with. It's the dilemma of our time right now.
It's part of what you used to call. Yeah, it's part of what you used to call the boomer truth regime. This idea that is valorized in our society of that, you know, we can all change the world. You know, we're going to change. We're going to bring in the age of Aquarius, where, you know, we're going to be the change we want to see in the world. You know, you're going to be Greta Thunberg, a child schooling the the elders. I mean, casting children as like Christ in the temple. Well, you're not Christ in the temple. Most people are just miserable, ignorant, children, and but we don't valorize wisdom anymore. Quite the opposite.
Chiaro Scuro says China has banned effeminate men from TikTok and all other media in order to promote family values and masculinity. They are, however, happy for this content to be supplied to the West. Well, of course, why wouldn't you be happy for this to be supplied to your enemies? I've said this before. China, yes, they are an enemy because they are a foreign power. They're a conventional, old school foreign enemy, basically. But their leaders are wiser, let's just say, than ours in many, many ways. And on Friday, I'm going to have Keith Woods on the Cigar Stream, and we're going to look at this Chinese social credit system, because everybody looks at that and says, yes, it's totalitarian. Oh, no, it's Black Mirror and all that. And it's going to come here. What nobody really does, though, is drills down into what is it that they're scored on, the Chinese. What is the moral kind of framework that's pushing the Chinese social credit system? And I think that conversation with Keith may lead to some interesting places. And we were just talking about the veneration of youth. I mean, in China, they've always respected their elders.
Yes.
Well, I would say no. I would say they haven't always respected you. You seem to forget the Cultural Revolution.
Yes,
and
there was
the hideous aftermath of that. Yes. I mean, there was a huge rejection of this. But I think that the people currently in charge of China, they are smart enough to know that they need to protect that these things erode civilizations, and that they need to do what they can now to keep their society from unraveling. They see it. They know what happens in the other parts of the world. I don't think this is based. I think this is just self-preservation. But it isn't something. But it is something they abandoned in the 20th century to their peril.
I don't think it's nearly as wise for them to just let this propaganda continue to flow out to the West. And I know what you're talking about. Yeah, it weakens the West. Great. But this seems to me like helping the West destroy itself is just going to bring this stuff back to China after that. It seems like Germany sending Vladimir Lenin to Russia. I mean, that might have helped knock Russia out of the war. But that didn't seem like such a great idea 20 years later when the Soviets were invading right back into Germany.
Scorpion sting of unintended consequences.
I think something like that.
And I mean, I don't even think like you don't need like Galaxy Brain to figure this out. America's already importing their ideology all throughout the world. I mean, I'm not saying like China is the reason it's as bad as it is in America, but them feeding back into that cycle shows that they're a bit more short-sighted than we might suppose.
Yeah, feminism's just going to end up invading everywhere. Even like the most based Islamic country is eventually going to fall because it's just the nature of the beast and the way the world is right now. I mean, we're in the age of the gamma, so naturally feminism is going to take hold everywhere.
Narco Republican says all the liberal... Yeah, go on.
Very quickly, I was going to say a good follow-up cigar stream would be to analyze what is our social credit system going to look like over here.
Yeah, that'd be interesting too. Yeah. Narco Republican says all the liberal cope can be reduced to it's unavoidable, therefore you must embrace it. Bowden was absolutely correct when he pointed that out. When he pointed out that liberalism is moral syphilis. Yeah. Coney says AA wields the no horny bonking bat like a righteous warrior with his sword. Narco Republican says tall gay Kath is better than short fat otaku. Maven says my school experience of zero discipline and pervasive violence is preferable to turnips. Autorista says every foreign... Well, I mean, I covered that before, Maven, if you remember, on one of my now long hidden stray thoughts, where I actually said that the bullying of the schoolyard is probably better discipline than we'll get from the state. There's like
absolutely. I mean, as the old person here, I mean, I grew up in I would say the very tail end of a kind of traditional boys' education in Britain, and it was basically hierarchy and violence, constantly, and it was on the way out then. I mean, in the early 80s, but I mean, all the things that Turner describes were just absolutely unheard of.
Autorista says every foreign element is subversive to cultural status quo you're in. Your 50s normie Anglo-social conservatism is impossible to reconcile with other cultures, especially non-West ones. You become Francoist. Maven says, teacher relative says that in the last 10 years, the people beating everyone up was swapped from the men to the lesbian women. Literally lesbians beating up men.
Yeah, I'm not going to comment because I think we might get into too spicy a territory here.
I didn't know they were lesbians anymore. I thought that everyone, has just become non-binary.
I do know they have high rates of domestic violence in lesbian relationships.
Yeah, the highest of any relationship.
In Oklahoma, though, the ones being kicked out for bullying, they aren't the lesbians. It's a different group.
Coca-Cola says, I knew there were copers in AA's audience, but the recent comments chat reveal a plague of lolbitarian Maracons who still don't get the degeneracy spreads. What is to be done? P.S. Bully back better. Well, I mean,
it's the word Maricon. Did he use that word?
Yes.
Very clever.
Maricons.
Yeah, look up Maricon if you don't know what it means.
Well, I will, because I don't. My French is not good, as you well know.
It's Spanish.
Oh, is it Spanish? Oh, so there you go. That's how good it is. I didn't even know. Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yes. It's
a way around YouTube's filters, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the Q in LGBTQ. All right. So that was the entropy super chats. I will say, Coca-Cola. A lot of the worst copers you've seen have not been audience members. They have been degen death squad sent in by evil dev, etc. Who, they've been sending their zombie hordes our way, and we've just been smiting them with the sword of righteousness. Ratface says, check out Dutton's during the course of this stream, old Charlie there, he's probably got like a, they talk about like the Coomer arm, which is one slightly bigger than the he's got like the degen the
ban arm.
He's got the ban arm.
Yeah, repetitive strain injury from banning people. Ratface says, check out Dutton's latest Odyssey stream. Are autistic immune to fads and trends? At 2517, he addresses how muscular women can have fertility issues. I'll check that out. Dylan98 says, AA, do not come. Zoomers, I'm gonna come. Also, AA, get the pressure back on for one show. Pansexual Walrus says, the leftover of the anti-SJW YouTube era are the Coomers and the Bugmen. I mean, they haven't done themselves a particularly good. I mean, the only one who's covered himself in anything like glory has been Dear Carl, but that's probably because he came to the event and just by sheer osmosis of that much red pill in one room, he can't be a Bugman anymore. So I think Carl is
also he's also got a wife and several children, so I think that also does something to a man.
I know that Sargon's got a lot of haters, but some part of being like on the right is just inbuilt in your personality as well. So I always just think he's been he's a kind of a natural small C conservative in a way that some of these other characters are not, obviously. I mean, I've never known like Sargon to be into the fucking anime degen unless I missed any of that. Fen says, liberals and libertarians don't realize they're enslaved by their desires, impulses, and paraphilias.
Yeah, paraphilia.
Yeah, I mean, it is enslavement. It is a type. You think, I mean, one of the best comments I saw on this is that the sheer amount of rage I elicited with this video, and the sheer amount of the stuff I've been called, like people call it, I'm still getting it now. I just had a look on Twitter and people are saying, oh, you fear strong women, you've never been laid, you're a loser, blah blah blah.
As if any of them were getting any.
All of this sort of stuff. But what it's like is basically when you tell a drug addict that drugs are bad and you shouldn't really take them, they will be aggressive and they will start to try to attack you in some way because they're protective of they're protective over the vice, whatever it is. And this is the same way, really.
Oh, of course, it involves the same neural pathways, some of the same signaling chemicals. These sorts of kind of I would say extreme usages of these sorts of images and such. Yes, it's exactly the same.
But Bubblegum Gun says, so vagina for virgin welfare system, state mandated girlfriend. D's bit of rough, I don't really understand that. D's bit of rough says, all jokes aside, it's very telling that all of the people defending this are weak, feeble men, like SFO. P.S. Good to see you back, Mr. D. I hope you're well.
Oh,
that's the first ever serious,
like normal, non-degenerate super chat from.
Isn't it funny that something like this made D's bit of rough to come?
It's quite touching.
Yeah. 21st century C2 COTYK says things fall apart. 20% of Western Zoomers are self-admittedly already gone. Not to mention those who don't admit it. They will not spawn more naturally, build new society, stop the transmission vector. Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that. I mean, I have seen people as well. I mean, you got to remember, there have been lots and lots of people on our side as well, obviously, and they haven't managed to ratio any of the dislikes, which is which is at least gives us hope, to say the least. But there have been people who've said things like, that I needed this, and it's probably put me right, or it's probably saved me from this and that. So there are people who have been kind of influenced in a positive way as well, I'd say. Pansexual Walrus says the youth have grown up being told they can be anything by their boomer parents. Inevitably, you realize that you're not perfect. Thus, any portrayal of ideal morals become personally offensive. Yes, probably a very good point. I mean, I know this guy Frank Ferrudi, who kind of is a big influence on the Spiked crowd. I met him at an event once, but he wrote a book about judgment and about how the worst moral sin now in the 21st century is to be too judgy. Nobody wants to feel like they're being judged.
Ugh. Yeah, that's a big one.
But ultimately, this is the heart of true morals. In every way. I mean, not just just in general morality, but in everything. Like art criticism. I mean, literally, the idea of sort of enforcing standards of any sort is called judgmental.
Yeah, no, it's bullshit. I see it too, sort of in my own profession. There's lots of pressure to, as you say, sort of with the shit sandwich, where you layer on lots of praise, and then you give all right, but here, here's where you can improve a little bit, but good job, sort of thing, instead of just being direct. Here's where you did good. Here's where you did wrong. Focus on
because the feelings are more important than anything else.
Yeah.
If you ever want to watch something truly cursed, sometime Google and go on YouTube and look for "Free to Be You and Me."
Oh. Sounds
bad. Which was a 1970s production, which I would say was an early promulgation of some of these terrible ideas. Michael Jackson's in it, by the way.
We must pick up the pace here. There's there's just quite a lot of these. Hold on.
Yeah, it's 220 here. Let's go.
Oh my god. Okay. Just trying to find them. No, this is where my Vince McMahon tactics have truly backfired. Look, because I don't even. Okay, here we go. Porphyrion Timo Thulius says, AA, you put the cart before the horse with your positive vision. We need youth groups to mentor boys into men first. When are you going to let me on to discuss your pagan critiques of Christianity? Thus, this original sin nonsense is one of the primary ones. Yeah, I've just had a message from your buddy about that. The best thing you can do, mate, is to email me, and maybe we'll do it. Yeah, I may be away next Friday. Going away with in fact next 2 Fridays, so we may have to plan that out. Okay. May have to be next month. EC90 says divorce and fornication are the most destructive and corrupting sins in human society and largely responsible for what you're complaining about. Have you confessed and repented of your own sins? No, I've been trying to, EC90, but unfortunately I've been gate-kept out of the the church. What's it called?
Society of St. Pius the X.
Yeah. I was literally just gate-kept. And they're like, you can't come, you're not Catholic. Siley says, I do want to come across, I do not want to come across as a brown noser, but AA is 100% right. Well, of course I am. Those like Dev and V are vile libs who should be disregarded. I'm a Zoomer, by the way. Well, thank you very much, Siley. Good to know that there are some base Zoomers. Hunger says, who'd have thought banning anime might be the thing to save Western Civ? Honestly, your most underrated idea. Yeah, I mean, the amount of anime involved in this thing, just as a kind of side issue, has been frankly shocking to me.
That was another one. Children will wear to school articles of clothing just covered in hentai, like different scenes from hentai, different faces and all of that, and it's just normal.
Frank Underwood says porn addiction is known to desensitize users until they start viewing homosexual and degenerate material to get off. Some even act it out. I fully believe fetishes warps one's sexuality over time. Yes, I mean, I truly believe that people on our side of things overrate the... Yes, biology always gets a part, and the left is stupid to ignore biology, but I do believe that people can be pushed as well. I believe that... Yeah, I'll say this now. You can make fun of me. I believe that if I had grown up in this time, I'd have either been gay or had confused kind of gender issues.
Well, I think it's actually even beyond that, because what happens is that when people looking at extreme material of this nature, it's perfectly analogous to drugs, which I of course have sad experience with earlier in my life. But you quickly become tolerant to the dose needed to give you a high, and so you increase your dose. And the same with these materials. Very quickly, just normal images of people having sex are not going to do it for you, and so you will seek out more and more and more extreme things. And it's the same with heroin. You will need more and more and more and more to get the high, until the dose that you need to get you high is enough to kill you, and then it's over. Well, I think with some of these sorts of images, the depravity, the places of depravity that people can be led, it's far worse than just becoming a femboy. I mean, say that.
Do you remember in Clockwork Orange how Alex Boy is reconditioned? Like they try to recondition his brain by, showing him violent images and making sure he has a gag reflex when he thinks about doing violence, or when he hears, Ludwig van, right? He's given Pavlovian reconditioning. Well, if you think about pornography, it's one of the few things that people will do where their entire focus is on it. There'll be people watching this stream now. They'll be playing a video game. They'll be talking to their friends. They'll be doing something else, right? It's kind of a passive activity listening to a stream like this that you can kind of multitask with. Whereas I imagine, I could be wrong, but I imagine most people devote their sole attention to that, and it's repetitive, which means it's happening on a daily basis, sometimes sometimes multiple times a day if they're truly addicted, right? If it, I always remember watching this documentary where this guy was like, I masturbate 10 times a day. Well, can you imagine, right? You're intensely focused on, on these sounds and images 10 times a day if you're that addicted, okay? Or let's just say it's once a day, let's just say it's 4 times a week or whatever. Over time, that can, I am positive, change the way your brain reacts to things, change the way your body reacts to things.
And to the point where these people will become unable. I mean, this is happening. Young people are doing this. They will eventually become unable to, so if it's in the case of men, maintain an erection if they're actually in the position where they're going to have intercourse with another, with a woman or whatever. I mean, they literally won't be able to do it. And you're absolutely right. I mean, it does work on the brain in a very similar way, and it sort of involves a lot of the same pathways. And it's a very, very dangerous path to go on.
Yeah, I also believe it's damaging for women, but in a very different way.
And I've changed my position on this. I mean, as I said, quite recently. I used to be quite laissez-faire about these questions, but it's and sadly the damage can be seen quite clearly.
I'll still say that degeneracy does have its place in like a long-term relationship, like with a certain woman, like with a special one, because I think the innate sexual strategy for men is unlimited access to unlimited sexuality, which is why pornography is so prevalent and free, mind you, is the other one, because there's such a high demand for it. So I do think it is actually important for the sake of a marriage to ensure that, you spice things up every now and then to ensure that your man isn't going to go look off for another piece somewhere else. I think there is something to be said for that. But
I don't think that. But I mean, I would question calling that degeneracy. I mean, the act of looking at images is a very different thing from actually having sex with a woman.
Well, we were talking about the sex toys thing earlier, D, and I was like, I'm not just saying that in like that's not the only example I'm saying, but I'm just saying Well,
within the privacy of the married couple's bedroom, they can make these decisions for themselves.
I agree.
So let's carry on. Microwaves Easy says, blame not the tomboy for having the abs, but the agenda drivers who seek to make the abs inherently sexual. Yeah, I mean the thing is that it's a very false framing all throughout this debate to say that this was really about, quote, tomboys or even the concept of women having abs. That was very much a non-issue in this whole thing, and I just disregard anyone who falsely frames the debate in that way. Porphy Ryan says, let me also just comment how incredibly ironic it is to hear someone as audibly effeminate as Settlers Lament talk about traditional masculinity. I told you, Settler. I told you before I came on the stream you'd get that comment.
Yeah, no, I knew I would.
Jedi Green Walker says, you can tell it's artificial because tomboys can keep their femininity, but the opposite of a tomboy is a crossdresser, which is never masculine. I mean, we talked about this earlier on. I mean, Pharaoh was posting images earlier on of like what actual tomboys were. They weren't fucking bodybuilders. They were just like, yeah, okay. Let me just show the actual images of tomboys that people.
Well, someone posted Christy McNichol, or I was thinking also with the idea of women wearing men's clothes, like Annie Hall. Who was
so these were the images.
Not a masculine character at all, but
yeah, these were the images that we were looking at before. There you go. That's a tomboy. Or oh shit, that's a tomboy. Christy McNichol.
Yeah,
there's a lot of these in video games these days too.
That one. That's not a fucking bodybuilder who looks like Conan the Barbarian.
No.
So anyway, Glow in the Dark says, I don't think an actor of theatre, which is a very feminine career, has much ground to stand on here, unless you play an action hero and look like Arnold or The Rock. Well, I mean, Evola mentioned that, didn't he? He mentioned that an actor is not going to ever be a true like man in that way. Glow in the Dark says tomboy phenomenon is a pushback of the femboy trend, in which a girl that acts like a guy is still preferable to a guy that acts like a girl. Yeah, I mean, I saw a lot of memes saying something like reject femboy cock, embrace tomboy ass or something. And it's just like, what the fuck? Like, how about just like embrace a girl if you're a man and embrace a man if you're a girl? Like, why does it have to be so difficult? I don't get it. Caro Scuro says, and I mean, this is, when I say this is penetrated deep, I see it like deep in like even right-wing spaces where you see this sort of thing go on. People who like exclusively sleep with femboys now. I'm like, how the fuck has this happened? This was nothing. This did not exist when I was a teenager. It didn't even exist about 5 years ago. I'm sure of it. Am I making this up? Hello?
No, it absolutely certainly didn't exist. I mean, you know, I would say that this thing became something certainly after 2010, 2012. You know,
I had only heard of like the concept of a femboy or something like that 3 years ago. Like before I went into high school and during the first year, it was just unheard of, and no one even knew what it was.
I mean, yeah, there's all, you know, of course, there's a niche, you know. I mean, there were drag, there were cross dressers, you know, there were kind of, you know, men into this sort of sissy thing, but it was a very small hidden subculture. It was not like literally cultural phenomenon where you have people, you know, saying, you know, with like anime girl avatars, you know, talking about Evola. It's very odd.
I can see like the pathetic degenerates are still like saying, "Oh, it's been 3 hours. What is there left to worry about?" You see,
I gave a list, and we could go on for hours of things to worry about.
See, the thing is, we're talking about things that are of civilizational importance, and you are dealing with the most autistic corner of the internet. We'll never give up. You will never be able to ratio. You'll never be able to get anywhere. You know, you'll never be able to get past the mods. So just give up. Just give up. You're weak at the end of the day.
Yeah, and being an old bastard, I'm beyond carrying. So I'm certainly not going to be frightened of an army of people who lick women's abs. You know.
Cairo Scuro says, "How does porn? You know, what's it going to mean? Like, you're going to call D an incel and all this sort of stuff. It's just it's nothing. It's water off a duck's back for all of us." Cairo Scuro says, "How does porn, consisting largely of white women, inform the behavior and opinions of those who visit the West?" Well, Cairo Scurio, if those white women are almost exclusively sleeping with and having sex with, let's just say, you know, men of color, then there could be certainly an impression given to those men who are coming in, especially if the image of white men in those same things is always being this kind of wimpy, cuckold, feminine, you know, there are undeniable political aspects to that, and it's embedded deep in the messaging of porn. And I don't want to get into a discussion of who controls that porn, but you know, it's something I've talked about a year ago, and something I will continue to talk about, something that people have talked about through history as well. Jedi Knight Anakin Cringewalker says, "First wave feminism, what women do is equal to what men do. Fourth wave feminism, a free woman is someone who does masculine things, the ashes." Glow in the Dark says, "You may not like tomboy abs, but it's a phenomenon like in the real old days where they thought ankles were sexy. It's rare."
No, it isn't. Women have ankles. Most women don't have fucking 8-pack abs. It's not the same thing. God's sake.
I mean, it's not. This is not about abs on women. This whole thing is not about abs on women. It's about men behaving like teenage schoolgirls in relation to abs on women and selling an impossible dream. You know, Dee talked about the fact that women cannot be built like that. They can't. Like, I mean, I used to watch wrestling. I remember Chyna. Do you remember her? Like, she spent basically she was roided up. She spent every day in the gym, and even she didn't have a body like that. It's an impossible dream. Women just can't, like, even the top athletes in the world can't look like that. So you're setting the women up for absolute failure as well if they go for it.
Right, and in this entire analysis, we've only focused on the people that like this stuff and not the women themselves. In fact, the only time the women have come up is when they're just deliberately destroying their beauty through other things, and one of those is not just self-improvement.
Yeah, and as somebody has just pointed out, China died before she was 40 as well. That's true. Tragic story. Glow in the Dark says, if you want to talk about a trend that's more like what you describe as detrimental, look up Dommy Mummy trend, or an older woman that takes care of you, which is the complete abdication of manliness. Okay, I mean, I'm sure there are other trends. I just picked on this one because I saw more and more people sharing this sort of nonsense.
I'm less worried about that because women just like don't take care of men. You know, it's just like there's no like women who's jumping at the jowls to, you know, take care of a man and provide for him and stuff like that. So those guys are just gonna die alone.
Matthew Ivy says, off topic, but short fat Taco used to be Scrump's cog saint for streams until they had a falling out over Dev's inability to move past 2015 politics. Well, for Scrump, I will say he was at the event, and for whatever other sins he's got, he seemed very base to me. I had a good long old chat with him, and he's certainly done his reading and developed his thinking since those days. Glow in the Dark says, agree to many people get sucked up into fictional worlds, but you need to address the entertainment industry from Star Wars to theater. Look how many YouTube channels go over franchises and compare it to political channels. I mean, that's a huge space, the you know, like the EFAP crowd and stuff. I mean, it's just endless, like Star Wars analysis, basically.
Yeah,
they're doing 24
Although, I mean,
streams.
Princess Leia was not masculine, you know.
Rey was, though, wasn't she?
Well, that's a different era, isn't it? Yeah.
But I do think, though, that even if you went back and watched the original Star Wars movie, she was feisty. You know, she was she knew her own mind, so she was a kind of feminist. Leia was, let's not forget the justified strike in Alderaan. But that's a different.
True. I mean, they dressed her up in a slave costume, though. I mean, that was something.
Pansexual Aura says, I tweeted about how these people are the same people who ate up Jordan Peterson lectures, but fail to grasp the implications behind how we illuminate archetypes in stories we internalize. I would actually say that, and I've never talked about Jordan Peterson much, but I would say these are people who never found it to Jordan Peterson lectures, because say what you want about Peterson, there's a heart of a right-wing idea in him. I'm not saying he's perfect, but he respects hierarchy, he understands inequality as a fact of life, and he tells people to clean up their rooms, which is ultimately all like properly right-wing things. Okay, I'm not saying the guy's perfect, I'm just saying that he set people on a path. And I would say that people who ate up Jordan Peterson are probably much more likely to be in our circles than in theirs this time.
He's the weed, we're the crack. He's the gateway drug.
Yeah. Fen says, I mean, if there were two gateways, it would be, you know, Sargon and Jordan Peterson, I would say. Fen says, just say it, D. It takes steroids, male hormones for a girl to get like that.
I mean, I didn't want to say it because I'm sure there is some path to it, but generally, yes, it is through artificial enhancement. It's very difficult, and as someone said about Dutton mentions, it is. As far as I know, it can be quite damaging to female fertility.
Yeah, and just on that issue, I remember like one of the first big MMA fighters was this woman named Gina Carano, and then she was on like a hot winning streak, and then the fight she lost was against this battle axe whose nickname was Cyborg. And Gina Carano was very strong, was strong and fit for a woman. She looked like a woman. You didn't even really see any abs on her, but, you know, she was just fit and athletic. But the chick that she fought against was an absolute monstrosity. And it was later found out that, yeah, she was definitely juicing. And the only way she looked like that, because we're comparing like peak athletes in women's MMA. and the one who was doing it without the enhancements, she looked nowhere near like what we see in the meme or this other chick with the abs. Like there's no, I am not convinced a woman can look
It's a
like
slippery
that
slope, patriarch, because in popular opinion, I don't think there should be. I think you should be watching women fight in a cage.
No,
I think the whole concept is degenerate. So
Right,
no, me neither.
more super chats. Let's talk about. I'm gonna have to really pick this up. By the way, I should mention. People talking about the Sargon Jordan Peterson pipeline to here. There is also kind of like other weird pipelines. Like there's a kind of Wig Night to AA pipeline as well. How those people exist is less clear, but they do exist. I bet you there are people who are like, I found you through other strange means. So, Lady of Shalott
to AA.
Yeah, there's a Keith Woods to AA pipeline. Believe it or not, I'm sure there's an AA.
Keith has become, Keith's great. He's certainly sort of done a heel turn.
What it is that I think basically there aren't that many base channels left on YouTube. They all got banned, so it's just like people like there's nothing else on, so you have to watch
last
AA.
people standing. Yeah.
Lady of Shalott says this degeneracy is all death by 1,000 cuts for our people in civilization. The only woman who like these caricatures are on testosterone. Yes, exactly, Lady of Shalott. And Lady of Shalott is actually coming on UO tomorrow night, D, to discuss the very important issue of what the hell's happening in Australia. This is why we're doing this stream tonight, because we thought we must discuss Australia tomorrow.
Yeah, I quite like Lady of Shalott. As you know, I say that she's risen above wine mum status, and she's quite cultured, and I think of a similar age to me. So. So she has very good ideas, and she's a woman of culture, so to speak. So,
did I just hear D say positive things about a woman?
I know what's happening to me.
So the wide mums of 1D around. I knew it.
No, just Lady of Shalott.
Game and Miles says these guys must go to MMA and do hard labor. They would appreciate the naturally soft, plumpy bodies of women when they toughen up. Drakanda Plus says, oh, that was another one I was getting on Twitter, by the way. You must have been beaten up and bullied by girls when you were in school. There was a lot of that thing as well. Drakanda Plus says, take the Brosnan pill. I mean, I was, but that's by the by. I'm joking.
What?
Drakanda Plus says, take the Brosnan pill, become the architect. Patrick says, Patrick says, Dev's Discord is filled with prawn and trans. Samuel Flack says what conservatives often fail to grasp is that many women simply don't want to marry. They would prefer a single mom plus a hard job over submit to an average man.
I don't think they prefer that, by the way. But anyway.
I mean that's only true in the sense that we live in such a dysfunctional sexual culture that's where women end up. That's not what they actually find more fulfilling. The only women that would find being single more fulfilling than being married are nuns.
Yeah, and on that note, it was mentioned much earlier in the stream, Sex in the City, and but there was this great article I read a while ago, and I'll just read you the title of it. So it says, Sex in the City writer Candace Bushnell, 60, admits she regrets choosing a career over having children and says she is now truly alone. So
I know
I
know lots of career women who have hit 40 or they've had kids later on and they regret that they didn't do it earlier. That they regret, that they were pushed down this path by everybody. Basically, they didn't feel like. Don't forget, women are very compliant. As talking of Jordan Peterson, the open personality, all of this sort of stuff, conscientiousness. Most women will kind of do as they're told most of the time.
Yeah, that's largely why we have this. Go make your bag and make your money and chase your career instead of be a homebody. But
UTIS 4321 says the primary message of the strong, empowered woman. I'd be interested to know, like our friend Poe we've mentioned. She's young. She's like in her early mid-20s at the oldest, and she's already had one child, and is now having a second child. She's got a career. I wonder if she's just kind of an anomaly, or is that a new trend of like a zoo? I don't know if she's like a young millennial or an older Zoomer, but
I'd say she's a very young millennial. But I think in her case, autism has a lot to do with it.
but is she an outlier, or is there a trend of women doing that? Like, because one of the negative aspects of, I mean, I think this was conservatives' fault more than anyone else. But when I was a teenager, conservatives had demonized teenage pregnancy so much that everybody thought having kids young was just a no-no, like an absolute no-no. And that was like really the Daily Mail who did that.
Yeah, this is actually a really big gripe that a lot of people in my circles have with like traditional conservatives about that, like demonizing sex from the moment you're born kind of deal. A lot of women get really freaked out about that, like when you have to perform in a marriage, about the vast sexual needs of a man, and a lot of them can get really freaked out about this kind of stuff. So I'm not advocating for that we need to start like teaching sex at like age 5 and any of that nonsense, or having a plethora of sexual partners is a good idea. It's not at all. But I have a serious problem with this have sex and you're going to go to hell stuff. I think it's very damaging as opposed to very helpful.
If you fornicate, you will go to hell.
Utiz 4321 says the primary message of the strike. I just love the old school nature of using fornicate. For Utiz 4321.
I was coming up with like the most formal way to describe all this. It took me like a few minutes to describe the tail part.
Utiz 4321 says,
"Are we like the weirdest panel ever on a YouTube stream? Is this
well,
like
it's weird circumstances, D.
Is this like the strangest collection of personality types and people?"
Utiz 4321 says the primary message of the strong, empowered woman is to hate the feminine and not have kids, and this leads to a lot of middle-aged fat cat ladies. How sad. White Raven 7278 says, spot on, D. I love D's recent videos. I love Dev's recent videos have usually been decent. What I'm hearing on this stream is very disappointing. He sounds like a lefty child.
Well,
yes.
As I said, I mean, Dev is a very smart fellow, and he has done some excellent videos in the past. I don't have any animus towards him, but certainly disagree on many issues. So it is a bit disappointing because I know that he's capable of arguments better than the ones he's been giving.
I just want you to pull up the Al Pacino, Glengarry Glen Ross rant on Kevin Spacey, where he just says, "You're a child." Okay, let's carry on. Oh God, this bloody thing is. Oh, we may have to have a super chat catch-up stream at this rate. This is fucking ridiculous. Yes, okay, here we go. Justin Dibari says, AA, I agree with most of what you said, but I believe the portion of the tomboy trend has been a reaction by young men on how horrible young women have been lately. Part 1. Part 2. Recreating a false dichotomy between femininity and their narcissistic and whorish behavior in the eyes of young men, leading them to seek what they perceive to be rational behavior in women that act similar to their male friends. That's interesting. So he's saying that actually them wanting kind of more masculine men is actually a reaction to how abhorrent most women are. So this is like a fantasy. Cope. He spent $30 to say it.
So I thought we were trying to speed these along.
Yeah, I mean, with the tomboy thing, I can understand, but that's different than the sort of blatant sexual inversion we were talking about earlier, isn't it? I think those are different things.
Well,
but
also
with the whole interest in tomboys, I don't know. I think the appeal of the tomboy, I think, is a very adolescent thing. Oh, look, she likes video games too. Oh, look, she likes to skateboard with us.
Right.
I think it's a good point.
I think that's something people grow out of as they get older.
And tomboy, sort of tomboyish girls usually grow out of that, as soon as they reach puberty or shortly afterwards.
Yeah.
But, I do think there's another sort of poisonous idea in culture, which is this idea that, of course, men and women can be friends, which I don't think is possible.
Yeah, I
really.
agree.
I agree with that, D.
Yeah.
100% agree.
And there's many expectations, of course, that that a marriage is just this sort of like giant fantasy, and it's you're going to spend every waking moment with your wife, sort of giggling and catching frogs and watching rom-coms, and it's not realistic. And I
I
do
just
think
want
it's led.
children.
Yeah, I think it just led people onto to very unrealistic expectations of what a relationship is supposed to be like, and yeah, a woman is it's just not, it's not like your best friend. Don't try to find like the female equivalent of your male best friend, because you're not going to find that.
Yeah, no, that's a
Yeah.
woman's way of fulfilling in a relationship, because she will adapt to your interests. She will pick up your politics, your interests, your religion, your everything. So a woman can be obsessive over you and make you the number one in your life, but you as the man can never make the woman the number one in your life. You have to make your mission the number one in your life.
I bought AA Lodge today as a step towards this, because I feel like I need space to work, and you can't just be 24/7 in the same place as the woman. Jedi Knight Anakin Cringewalker says NYC has all this, I can confirm. Glow in the Dark says Dev, typical left-wing person, standards exist, but whose standards should we live by? Yours? Why not theirs? If it doesn't harm you directly, let it go. May disagree with you on this one thing, but I think your heart is in the right place. In regards to so that was Glow in the Dark. I mean, the trouble is that they see no difference between any set of laws, any set of morals, and they're not equal. The ones that we're talking about were around for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's not arbitrary. It's not just made up on the spot. But yet they treat it that way. When this is the ultimate problem. Dusty Time says
it's because their god is their penis. They want to coom. That's it. And their god is a jealous god, and they're angry at anything that tries to get in between them and their ability to coom.
Yeah, most of them don't even know they have that god.
Dusty Time says, in regards to Sarah Connor, I would point you to American Krogan's video on the Terminator series. Basically, Sarah Connor and Kyle Reese reflect a biological essentialist kind of relation. I'll watch that, because American Krogan's videos are truly amazing. His BioShock one recently was just out of this world, I thought.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Justin Biari says, part 3, which is wrong behavior brought on by a lack of modest women, but not exactly an embrace of emasculation muscle fetish, just a warped perception of what modest female behavior should be. Okay. DRT is King says, I don't know if I was an anti-sex event, but no dude I knew in HS got laid. That was 2008 to 2012, but I feel this is a problem born from loneliness. EC90 says, AA, the fruits of the spirit are love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Dabari, with a fourth part, says, also young men falling into the trap of, wouldn't it be neat if my girlfriend had the same interests, video games and sports? Now, I have, even though we're running long, very quickly I'll say, and I don't want any counter signals on this, I truly believe that nerd girls were memed into existence, i.e. there was a concerted effort to create this type of the nerd girl, which is a fantasy and will never exist. Sorry to break your hearts, lads.
Spot on.
Entirely true.
But because there was such a concerted push, you then got actual girls trying to live up to that for the clout, because the girls are very compliant.
The attention of males, yes.
So you get this odd phenomena where you have like the female Star Trek fan, or the female, like the female nerd. But in my experience, they're never truly nerds. They're always kind of just doing it to hang type thing.
Yeah,
and
that doesn't mean that women don't, that there are some women who play video games and things like that, but it's a different thing. This trope is certainly fictional. I do think it's also probably a marketing thing, that whole
yeah,
thing.
just look at Twitch. The hot tub streamers You know,
Ugh.
and they're all managed by men, by the way. Fun fact.
Isn't Twitch just a porn site at this point? Do people still play games on there?
Glow in the Dark says, if you believe Tomboy is a problem and want to argue with the dev type, tell him the slippery slope exists and then say just 2 weeks to stop the spread. Yeah, EC90 says, hey, how do I get in touch with you? I want to send you a book that maybe could be reviewed later. It's relevant to this topic and morality in general. Best way is on Twitter, EC90. Felix Fairmount says, Righteous Fury may have found its eternal flame within this stream's contents. May Christ help us from this rampant degenerate world. Bubblegum Gun says, monarchists are to blame for the rise of the consumer. Monarchists?
Maybe
what?
monarchists?
I think he may mean
minarchists. Okay.
They're
yeah.
right next to each other on the keyboard, and I think that would be like the Chicago types.
Cringe Walker says, what terrible market force have forced a humble turnip merchant into selling illicit black pills to the Iranians? Truly, we live in trying times.
I am not selling black pills. I am just describing things as I saw them.
Okie dokie says, the elites have always been degenerate because they can afford to weather the deleterious effects, but they used to pretend for the sake of the lower classes for whom this stuff is ruinous. Absolutely correct, okie dokie. We discussed this before. Bumming for me, but not for thee, essentially. Dabari says, part 5, I'm an idiot in part 2. I meant to say the false comparison, not dichotomy, between modern degen women and femininity. I should take your writing course. Absolutely, Justin Dabari, £150 for Foundations of Writing, £375 for the whole Trivium, £50 for Foundations of Research, £350 for Foundations of Economics. And soon I'm going to have new courses coming out when I get AA Lodge. I've even been thinking about doing some literature courses because I'm so shocked by the lack of knowledge of the Western canon. I'm thinking of actually bringing out some lit. Glow in the Dark says, I remember this old saying, AA for moral degenerates. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. Absolutely. 21st Century says, Carl Schmitt in The Concept of the Political describes the apolitical Benthamite bugman as the telos of liberal society. Collapse has already occurred. Yes, indifference is not an option. You should care about it. Always call out their apathy. Always put the moral imperative back on them. JS says, maybe if we banned urinal art, this wouldn't happen. Not getting into that on this stream. Glow in the Dark says, utopian egalitarian truth regime. The fat wheelchair-bound woman is as good as everything as a healthy man. If it's not, it's bad. Cringe Walker says, the consequences of leaving the church are evident to return. To quote an old saying, the truth points to itself. Quite right. Loyalist says, isn't he a fellow, isn't he part of your church, Turnip, Cringe Walker?
Yes, Lutheran Church, Missouri Synod.
English Loyalist says, I'm afraid for the upcoming conflict with China. China is pushing masculinity, and we in the West are pushing feminism. We are between two powers, Islam and China. The West is too weak to fight either. Yes, and, when bloody Dev's followers are faced with the Chad Afghan and the Chad Chinese, what are they going to do? They'll just bend to the floor like little snack man with a tongue out. Ron Wood says, AA, have you read Language of Creation? Thanks a bunch. Cheers. I have not, Ron Wood. Murdoch Hancock says, women set standards, men enforce them. I would say men set standards, men also enforce them, but women on the ground level help to maintain those standards. UTIS 4321 says, but churches have been defanged, subverted. They push a Christianity for cows. That something has been useful doesn't mean it will be in the future. I will say Christianity has currently been subverted. Argyle Euphoria says, during the pandemic, lots of Zoomers took up croquet, quilting, baking bread, etc. But it's ironic and performative, not productive. Well, you could LARP yourself into it. Jacanda Plus says, how do I get in touch with you in preparation for tomorrow's stream? Well, Jacanda Plus, the best way is Twitter or Telegram is another way to get in touch with me very easily. Sam153 says, great stream as usual, AA. Well, thank you very much, Sam153. It means so much. Now let's get to shillings and finally get to fucking bed, shall we? So, D, anything coming up, sir?
Yes, there's something coming up. So after this stream of moralizing and railing against degeneracy, we were going to be doing part, 4 of our
Of
Andy
Warhol.
Warhol stream.
Yeah.
So I mean, I will say to people, you should watch the streams because there is a quasi redemption arc coming up that I think people aren't expecting. There is a reason that I chose Warhol. It wasn't just arbitrary. I do think there is something very important that happens to him over his career, especially in the late part of his career, that is relevant to our circles. So, have a bit of faith in me, chaps, and if you're interested, give it a watch.
Turnip.
Nothing yet. I am on Twitter now at Turnip Merchant. Also, I've been on a Radical Liberations channel now for the past few months, doing his econ minis and a series on the American Empire. So check those out if you're interested.
Yeah, those have been great.
Red Hawk. Anything?
Oh, right. You can find me still railing against feminism on Twitter at RedPilledHawk, and that's it for now. I may end up doing content at some point, but as I pointed out, I started a new job recently, so probably putting that on the back burner for now.
Patriarch.
I just put out a video yesterday. I think it was called "How to Deal with Subversion." So it's a really, I think, sort of useful video. It's just sort of like a short little case study. So I would encourage people to go check that out. I also have a stream planned with him where we're going to be doing something. I'm not sure on what. The guy is interesting. He's actually a convert from Reformed Judaism to Orthodoxy who's kind of aware of the JQ and stuff. And he's famous for writing a book on Masonry called On Masons and Their Lies, which is similar to another book about another group of people and their lies.
Perhaps vindicated in the past few weeks.
Yes.
Whoa.
Yes. But anyways, so yeah, that's I'm going to be trying to stream with Brother August. His YouTube channel is Brother Augustine. He's a good guy. I also have my evolution stream still planned. Sorry for the delays. My guest has been having some major problems. He's trying to go visit some family down in the lower 48, but he got stopped at the Canadian border, I think, because of COOF related things. So I think it's because he refuses to take the jab, but we'll see. But that's still a go. We're just waiting on him. And I'm working on another video on my Machiavelli series. So this one's going to be on like PR and public representation and stuff. So
one thing I'll say about Patriarch is that he is good at making edited videos, which is coming to be a lost art on YouTube. It's one I always appreciate, like the short, like little 7, 10, 15-minute vids. I still try to make them. They're still my bread and butter, but there's an incentive to do a lot of streams on YouTube, isn't there? So I appreciate the fact that you've made some excellent videos. All right. Settler, did we do you? I can't remember.
No, not yet. So I'm the world famous Settler's Lament. Make sure to subscribe. I have a live stream tomorrow with the Distributist and Charlemagne. We'll be discussing. We'll be discussing Mencius Moldbug's interview on Carlson. We'll also be discussing Mencius Moldbug's Love Quest. If you don't know what that means,
I was laughing really hard about that when I saw his post.
You'll find out tomorrow night if you don't know what that means. But
one of the funniest things that made my week, that did. So I've been very black pill recently, and I saw her post that, and I was like, "That's incredible." Anyway, carry on.
But that's what we'll be discussing tomorrow night. A couple other people too, but Distributist and Charlemagne are the only names that actually pull crowds. So the other people aren't very important.
People are starting to understand wrestling psychology now. Jim Hill said, I was proud of Semigog did that stream and it was like, oh, people say, oh, this is an amazing lineup. It was such star power. Can I just say, once upon a time, all of those guys were just unknowns on some random cigar stream I put together. Not as respect by star building power, people. Anyway, Gary.
If the chat is to be believed, apparently it's all me and I'm all them. I'm just a ventriloquist.
Yeah, he was just
semi-god
with the puppet show. Yeah.
Well, the prudentialist turnip Charlemagne question, yes, is remains eternal.
Jim Hill says. I'm a libertarian, but this is an important discussion, and the amoral relativist side doesn't deserve a seat at the table. Weak men have chosen tyranny for the sake of safety and comfort. Yes. Myra Croft Holmes says, settlers lament, the Pope is an agent of Satan. What say you? We're already going long. I'm not opening up that now. Glow in the Dark says, guess it was
not
just
even
me.
the gates of hell.
Glow in the Dark says, guess it was just me personally reasoning abs on women was exotic. But if you were talking about hulking bodybuilding women, yeah, I don't get it. What I'm talking about, Glow in the Dark, is all of the reaction memes of men putting themselves in the position of teenage girls. But if you haven't got that by this point, you're never going to get it. Buy my courses, buy a mug, join the channel. Most importantly, get out.